Chapter 38:41. Next, not only did he want to steal the star ink stone from Lin Yi, he also wanted to become Southern Sky Gate's disciple and obtain the minor phaseless technique. With these two things to rely on, he would have the chance to become the strongest golden core expert in the future. Yuzha, was not willing to be an ordinary nobody. Think about it. He even dared to do something like killing his own master, something that angered even the gods. What could stop him in the future? That being said, the difficulty of obtaining the minor phaseless magic from the South Heaven Gate was even higher than retrieving the star ink stone from Lin Er, who had appeared out of nowhere. Unlike the simple-minded Nan Tianyong, the second brother of the three heroes of the Nan clan, Nan Tianmen was extremely shrewd. Furthermore, from his reaction towards Nan Tianyong's death, it was obvious that he was a cold-hearted person. In fact, he could even be described as ruthless. No matter how bad his relationship with Nan Tianyong was, they were still brothers from the same mother. However, not only did he not feel the slightest bit sad about Nan Tianyong's death, he even seemed to be taking pleasure in Nan Tianyong's misfortune. If it wasn't for the face of the Nan clan's three heroes, he wouldn't even have asked about it. With such a temperament, Yuzha, who had killed his own master, could be said to be jackals of the same tribe. To numb such a troublesome person and obtain the minor phaseless technique from him was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. However, a technique like the minor phaseless technique was too rare. No matter how difficult it was, as long as there was a small chance, Yuzha would not give up easily. This was similar to the star ink stone, a technique that could change one's fate. However, its effect might not be as heaven-defying as the star ink stone. Yuzha knew that to obtain the minor phaseless technique, he had to first make Southern Sky Gate accept him as a disciple. If he wanted Southern Sky Gate to accept him as a disciple, then he had to curry favor with Southern Sky Gate and gain his recognition. Hearing Southern Sky Gate's question, Yuzha was silent for a moment. Only then did he reply, reporting to Marshal Uncle, "Although I was present when Master was killed, because I was quite far away, and because Lin Er's attack was extremely sinister and covert, I didn't see it too clearly. I only know that the move seemed to have condensed an unimaginable amount of chi, and the power of the explosion in an instant even caused the surrounding mountains to collapse, leaving behind a huge crater. The scene was extremely shocking." Really? The Southern Heavenly Gate couldn't help but be taken aback when he heard this. In recent years, the three great pavilions have sent a lot of people to set up layers of protective arrays in every territory, especially in a place like the market where all kinds of people are mixed together. In order to prevent cultivators from fighting and destroying the surroundings, they have specially arranged several layers of protective arrays. It is impossible for an ordinary person to destroy the surrounding mountains. Although the Foundation establishment stage could only be regarded as a beginner on the Heavenly Stage Island, it was still a heaven-defying cultivator who seized the fortune of heaven and earth. If they really had to use their full strength, they would not be able to do so. Even a random early-stage Foundation establishment expert could easily destroy a mountain range. There were so many experts on Heaven Stage Island, and there were all kinds of conflicts happening all the time. If there were no corresponding protective measures, the island would be destroyed. The 5 Heaven Islands had already been smashed to pieces. So how could they have been passed down for millions of years? The reason why the 5 heaven-ranked islands were able to remain standing was due to the various sections. It was they who set up layers of protective arrays everywhere on Heaven Stage Island to offset the damage caused by the battle between cultivators, which allowed Heaven Stage Island to continue to exist until today. Take the protective arrays set up around the market by the 3 great pavilions as an example. Due to the gathering of people in the market, almost all the cultivators on the North Island were gathered here, not just the disciples of the 3 great pavilions. All kinds of conflicts were unavoidable every day. If it wasn't for special measures, this place would have been destroyed long ago. the protective arrays around the market had always been the tightest, and the defensive power had always been the strongest. Even a full blow from an early-stage foundation establishment stage expert would not be able to leave any marks around it. What kind of power was needed to destroy all the mountains around the market with a single move? Even an expert at the peak of the late stage of the foundation establishment realm might not be able to do this. That's true, and according to Disciple's observation, that Lin Air himself doesn't seem to be able to control such a powerful killer move. He can only throw it out, and he can't maximize the lethality at all. Yu pondered for a moment. Logically speaking, since the power of Lin Yi's killer move was so terrifying that it could overwhelm the protective arrays and destroy all the surrounding mountains, it should be easy to kill Nan Tianyong, a peak late-stage foundation establishment stage expert, with such great power. However, although Nan Tianyong was caught off guard and was seriously injured, he did not die on the spot. If Yu hadn't killed him out of greed, Nan Tianyong would have been alive and kicking at this moment. Yu's speculation could be said to be reasonable, and it was indeed as he had speculated. Lin Yi couldn't completely control the true energy bomb, especially the super true energy bomb that he had been holding for an entire hour. Hearing Yu's words, the smile on Southern Skygate's face couldn't help but deepen. Interesting, interesting. Using a killer move that he can't even completely control, he was able to jump levels and kill number 3. I am more and more interested in this Lin Air you mentioned. Yu secretly smiled. It was good that he was interested. Otherwise, if this guy wasn't interested at all, how would he dig out this Lin Air for him? As expected, Southern Skygate immediately took the initiative to ask, since that Lin Air is a loose cultivator, then Marshal Nephew, do you know how to find him? Grassroot loose cultivators were not like the disciples of the 3 great pavilions. They rarely had a unique cultivation cave, and often didn't have a fixed place to live. Unless one was especially familiar with them, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens to find them. Reporting to Marshal Uncle, Disciple has been looking for him these days. I've been thinking of various ways, but I still haven't been able to dig him out. The reason why I was able to meet him in the market was purely by accident. Yu replied, respectfully, This is a bit troublesome. Southern Skygate couldn't help but frown. Even if the opponent had a killer move that could instantly kill Nan Tianyong, if he personally made a move, it wouldn't be a problem. However, how to find the opponent as soon as possible, this was the biggest problem. Chapter 3842. Even if it was only due to the pressure of public opinion, the higher-ups of the Soaring Pavilion would definitely take action. At that time, the experts of the Law Enforcement Hall would inevitably be involved, not to mention the fact that everyone knew about the 3 heroes of the Nan clan. Once Nan Tianyong died, the other 2 heroes would definitely seek revenge. With so many people watching him, unless there was something wrong with Lin Air's brain, there was no way he would continue to swagger around the market. If he didn't take the initiative to show himself, it would be easier said than done. Seeing this, Yu carefully suggested, Marshal Uncle, although this disciple doesn't know this Lin Second's exact background. According to what this disciple knows, he seems to be acquainted with the manager of the Hong merchant group in the inner street, Hong Zhong. We should be able to find out some useful information from him. Oh, Marshal Nephew, are you sure? This loose cultivator actually knows the shopkeeper of the Hong Clan Merchant Association? That's not simple. Southern Skygate was slightly stunned. Unlike King Nanshan Yong, who had been in seclusion for the past few years, Southern Skygate was very clear about the weight of the Hong Clan Merchant Association. It was truly a colossus. Even if he was only the shopkeeper of the North Island branch, he would still be an incredible figure. For a mere loose cultivator like Lin Air to be acquainted with the shopkeeper of the Hong Clan Merchant Association, in the eyes of a knowledgeable person like Southern Skygate, this news was even more shocking than him instantly killing Nan Tianyong. Yuzha nodded in confirmation, although I don't know how close these two are, according to my speculation. Hong Zhong seems to have given Lin Er a spirit jade card recently. This conjecture was purely the conclusion that Yuzha came up with after much thought. Even though it was a little groundless, this person's brain was good, and he really guessed the whole story. The basis of his speculation was the 3 times he and Lin Yi met in the inner street. The first time, the two of them took advantage of the opening day of the inner street and saw the star inkstone at the Hong Clan Merchant Association. The second time, the two of them met again on the opening day of the inner street a month later. At the same time, they rushed to the Hong Clan Merchant Association to compete for the star inkstone. From this, it could be seen that Lin Yi definitely didn't have a spirit jade card on him, nor did he have the right to freely enter and exit the inner street. He would definitely buy the star inkstone before this happened. The third time, it was not the opening day of the inner street. Yuzha was able to enter the inner street completely because of the spirit jade card in the hands of his cheapskate master, Nan Tianyong. However, what surprised him the most was that he actually met Lin Yi for the 3rd time at the Hong Merchant Association. When the inner street was not open to the public, there were only 2 types of people who could freely enter and exit the inner street. One was the disciples of the 3 great pavilions whose status and strength were recognized by the market, and the other was the VIP who held the spirit jade card. Yuzha had been buried in the library for the past 3 years. However, he knew all the famous people in the 3 great pavilions like the back of his hand. At the very least, he had never seen Lin Er's face before. Otherwise, with his photographic memory, he would have recognized him the first time he saw him. Since it was not the first one, the only possibility left was the second one. This Lin Er didn't have a spirit jade card, but for some reason, after buying the star inkstone from the Hong Clan Chamber of Commerce, he suddenly had one. So, naturally, Yuzha had this conjecture. Hong Zhong gave Lin Er a spirit jade card. Although this matter was a little unimaginable, he knew that Lin Er had something like the Foundation establishment barrier-breaking pill in his hands. Businessmen always liked rare goods, so it was not difficult to understand why Hong Zhong gave Lin Er a spirit jade card, because he thought highly of him. Spirit jade card? Interesting. Even someone at the level of number 3 doesn't have the right to receive a spirit jade card. If I remember correctly, this guy went to find Boss to borrow his spirit jade card a few days ago. Southern Skygate asked with a cold laugh. That's right, the spirit jade card can bring another person into the inner street. Without this spirit jade card, we wouldn't have met Lin Er this time. Yuzha nodded. A piece of trash who can't even get a spirit jade card. If he lives, he will only bring shame to Arnan clan. Oh, right, Marshal Nephew. Did you find eldest brother's spirit jade card on his body? If Boss comes back and finds out that his spirit jade card is gone, he will go crazy. Southern Skygate frowned. On the 5 Great Islands of Heaven stage, the spirit jade card was the best proof of a person's status. Even the strongest person would value it. Even the boss of the Nan clan's 3 heroes was no exception. Hearing this, Yuzha's heart tightened. The spirit jade card that Nan Tianyong borrowed from Boss was now in his hands along with the other treasures that were gathered from Nan Tianyong's body. Although he knew that without the owner's chi, even if he had the spirit jade card in his hands, he wouldn't be able to use a single bit of it. This was because to use the spirit jade card, one had to input chi and pass through the joint formation of the Merchant Guild. But Yuzha couldn't resist the temptation. The owner of this spirit jade card was the boss of the Nan clan's 3 heroes. The number of spirit jades on it was enough to dazzle any cultivator. Yuzha was no exception. It was rumored that as long as he could find the cooperation of a top merchant guild or someone from the Merchant Guild, even if it was someone else's spirit jade card. There was a way to extract all the spirit jades from it. Therefore, even though he knew that it was dangerous to keep this spirit jade card, Yuzha still couldn't bear to throw it away. The spirit jades in this spirit jade card were enough to surpass the value of all the treasures he found on Nan Tianyong's body. This was something he could rely on in the future. How could he throw it away? Reporting to Martial Uncle, Lin Air's killing move was too shocking. Many things on Master's body were lost. After that, it attracted a lot of onlookers from the nearby market. I couldn't care too much and could only steal Master's body. As for Martial Uncle's Spirit Jade card, I don't know who picked it up in the chaos. Although Yuzha was panicking, he didn't show it on his face and replied calmly. There were truths and lies in his words. Even a smart person like Southern Sky Gate wouldn't be able to determine the truth in such a short amount of time, unless he suspected Yuzha from the beginning and directly searched his body or his cave. Unfortunately, although Southern Sky Gate didn't have a good relationship with Nan Tianyong, he still admired Nan Tianyong's disciple, Yuzha. The eldest of the 3 heroes of the Nan clan, Nan Tianba, was very protective of his own people. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lent something as precious as the Spirit Jade card to Nan Tianyong without any hesitation. Once Nan Tianba returned and found out that his younger brother was indifferent to the death of third brother Nan Tianyong, the Southern Sky Gate could not imagine what kind of rage they would face at that time. A smart person like the Southern Sky Gate would never be so stupid as to threaten him like Nan Tianyong. The reason why he had the confidence to pay a visit to the Hong Merchant Guild was because there was a detail in Yuzha's words. Lin Air was not valued by the entire Hong Merchant Guild. He was merely valued by Hong Zhong, the manager of the North Island branch of the Hong Merchant Guild. Although it was only a few words different, the meaning behind it was completely different. If this Lin Air, he was an important customer valued by the entire Hong Merchant Guild, then even if the Southern Sky Gate had 10 times the guts, he would never dare to go to the Hong Merchant Guild and threaten them to hand over Lin Air's information. As the second most famous merchant guild on the 5 islands of Heaven rank, the Hong Merchant Guild was extremely protective of their customers, especially the important customers that they valued. They were always extremely protective of them. If Lin Air was this kind of customer, then forget about the Southern Sky Gate. Even if the 3 great pavilions of the North Island came forward to pressure the Hong Merchant Guild, it would be useless, although businessmen pursued profits and would often resort to unscrupulous means. The main reason why the Hong Merchant Guild was able to become the colossus it was today was because of its reputation. Without a strong reputation, it would be impossible to become a top chamber of commerce. To build such a degree of reputation, it would require years of operation. This process was very long and difficult, but it was very easy to destroy such a strong reputation, as long as they sold information about a customer. Even if it was just the simplest identity, once it was spread out, it would be enough to destroy the strong reputation that had been accumulated for thousands of years. Everyone who joined the Hong Merchant Guild, even the lowest manservant, had to go through all kinds of brainwashing every day. The most basic and most important rule was to protect the Hong Merchant Guild's reputation with their lives. However, if Lin Air was only valued by Hong Zhong, then it would be much easier to deal with. Where there were people, there would be conflicts. Even within the Hong Merchant Guild, it was not a monolithic block. If the higher-ups of the Hong Merchant Guild's Middle Island headquarters spoke, then Hong Zhong's position as the representative of the Hong Merchant Guild on the North Island would naturally be gone. The Southern Sky Gate knew very well that if they wanted to pry out Lin Air's identity from Hong Zhong, the first step was to separate Hong Zhong from the Hong Merchant Guild. The Southern Sky Gate did not dare to challenge the Hong Merchant Guild, but if it was only Hong Zhong, then there was still a chance to threaten them. May I ask, Martial Uncle, when are we going to the Hong Merchant Guild? Although Yuzha did not know what the Southern Sky Gate was planning, he still dared to say something like going to the Hong Merchant Guild even after knowing that Nan Tianyong had suffered a setback. It was obvious that he had something to rely on and his confidence. There's no rush. Let's talk about it in 2 days. Marshal Nephew, you should first send out the notice to search for boss's spiritual jade card. I need to prepare something, and at the same time, observe the situation. The Southern Sky Gate's expression was unfathomable. He then waved his hand at Yuzha, indicating that he could leave. Yes, Marshal Uncle. Yuzha did not say anything else and respectfully kowtowed. He faced the Southern Sky Gate and carefully retreated to the door, then turned around and left. Looking at Yuzha's back as he left, the Southern Sky Gate thoughtfully rubbed his chin and said to himself with a chuckle, "This kid sure pretends to be obedient, but if he wants to win my favor, he's still far from it." 3 days passed by in the blink of an eye. The supervising deacon, Nan Tianyong, was killed in an instant near the market. After 3 days of brewing, this matter had become known to everyone, not only the disciples of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, but even the disciples of the other 3 pavilions were discussing this matter during their leisure time. Chapter 3844. The market was a place where good and bad mixed together. Not only were there a large number of disciples from the 3 pavilions, but there were also a large number of rogue cultivators. Chapter if the murderer was a disciple from the 3 pavilions, then it would not be difficult to find the real culprit after a little investigation. However, if it was a rogue cultivator, then it would be very difficult to find the culprit. But what was surprising was that Nan Tianyong, a key figure in a key position, was killed in the territory of the 3 great pavilions. Everyone was just discussing it out of boredom, and it didn't cause any strong cries. No one deliberately created public opinion to pressure the higher-ups of the 3 great pavilions to find the real culprit as soon as possible. Nan Tianyong, the supervisor of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, had a poor relationship with others. Because of the widespread attention, the higher-ups of the Soaring Sky Pavilion had already come forward to investigate this matter. The nature of this matter could not be said to be bad. If they did not even care about Nan Tianyong, a person with a high status, being killed in his own territory, then where would the prestige of the Soaring Sky Pavilion be? How would they be able to convince the public in the future? However, although the Law Enforcement Hall had registered this matter, they did not make any targeted big movements. It was rather cold for a period of time. After everyone had forgotten about it, they would put it on the shelf. In the world of cultivation that was filled with fighting and killing, the death of a person was a common occurrence. Unless it was a massacre like the one in the Hiawatha Manor where thousands of people died, it would affect the interests of certain people. Only then would a large number of people be involved. This time, if Nan Tianyong's identity as the supervisor of the Soaring Sky Pavilion was not a little sensitive, the higher-ups would not pay attention to him at all. If he died, then he died. There was nothing to be surprised about. However, under the premise that there was no special greeting from the higher-ups, the Law Enforcement Hall was just going through the motions. In the words of the current Law Enforcement Hall master, Ramjia, the Law Enforcement Hall was not bored enough to seek justice for the weak. Only the big figures of the big forces. That was the real target they needed to keep an eye on. In the eyes of most ordinary cultivators, Nan Tianyong was already a high and mighty figure. However, in the eyes of Ramjia, he was no different from ordinary people at the bottom. He was just a lowly ant, and there was no need to waste energy on him. Sure enough, if I want to give boss a satisfactory explanation, I'll have to do it myself. The South Heaven Gate had expected this to happen. After being in the Soaring Sky Pavilion for so long, it was impossible for them to not know what the authorities and the disciplinary hall were like. Then he would have wasted his time. However, he did not wait in vain for the past 3 days. After all, apart from observing the situation, He had to prepare a trump card if he wanted to personally make a trip to the Hong Chamber of Commerce. And now, he had been waiting for this trump card. After calling Yuzha, the Southern Heavenly Gate immediately headed to the market square. However, he was different from Nan Tianyong. He had his own Spirit Jade card, so bringing Yuzha in was not a problem. Arriving in front of the Hong Chamber of Commerce, the Southern Heavenly Gate didn't say a word. With a cold expression, he strode in while Yuzha followed closely behind. The manservant at the entrance of the Hong Chamber of Commerce immediately sensed that something was wrong. Then he glanced at Yuzha. He immediately understood. Although he didn't know who the Southern Sky Gate was, Yuzha had been coming to the Hong Chamber of Commerce quite a few times recently. Moreover, the recent disturbances were all because of him. If the manservant still couldn't recognize him, then it would be a waste of the Hong Chamber of Commerce's painstaking training. "Where's your shopkeeper?" The Southern Heavenly Gate did not even look at the manservant. He curled his lips and said condescendingly, "The three heroes of the Nan family were used to being arrogant. Even as smart as he was no exception. He had never been nice to his subordinates. Furthermore, even if it was for the purpose of coming here today, he had to be arrogant. Disregarding everything else, he had to first suppress the other party with his aura. Otherwise, with the cunning nature of these merchants, there was no way he could pry the truth out of their mouths. To be honest, after seeing the Southern Heavenly Gate's behavior, Yuzha, who was following behind him, was somewhat panicking. Not only did his chief master, Nan Tianyong, suffer from the terror of the Hong Chamber of Commerce's guest chamberlains, even he himself had personally experienced it. Although it was only for a short moment, it was enough to make him tremble in fear. Although the Southern Heavenly Gate was very strong, even stronger than Nan Tianyong, who was at the peak of the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm, Yuzha did not think that he would be able to gain any advantage over the Hong Chamber of Commerce's guest chamberlains. Even if he was not inferior to the other party in a one-on-one fight, it was not like the other party only had one guest chamberlain. Although he was on tenterhooks, Yuzha knew that he had no right to criticize the Southern Heavenly Gate. Furthermore, the Southern Heavenly Gate was not a simple person. If he did not have someone to rely on, he would not do something so stupid. After a while, the two of them were invited to a private room on the second floor by the manservant. This time, to Yuzha's surprise, the shopkeeper Hong Zhong, who was always polite to everyone, did not stand up to welcome them. "May I know what the two of you have come for?" Hong Zhong sat on a wooden armchair and drank a cup of high-quality tea while looking at the two of them. He said calmly, "The Hong Chamber of Commerce sincerely welcomes any guest. However, if you are here to cause trouble, then forgive me for not seeing you off. Don't ask for trouble." As a businessman, Hong Zhong had always welcomed guests from all over the world with a smile. However, he had never been kind to guests who had obviously come with ill intentions. As one of the top Chamber of Commerce on the 5 Great Islands, if the Hong Chamber of Commerce was too arrogant, people would say that they were bullying their customers. However, Hong Zhong knew that he had to be tough sometimes. He even had to make a show of his power every once in a while. Otherwise, if he only knew how to be patient, it would make people think that he was weak and easy to bully. They would then climb all over him and cause him endless trouble. It might even affect the impression other customers had of the Hong Chamber of Commerce, which would make business difficult. In Hong Zhong's eyes, since the two people in front of him had obviously come with ill intentions, there was no need for him to be polite. It was already very polite of him to send them off with tea. If the two of them were still so stubborn, he would have no choice but to kill the chicken to warn the monkey. Ask for trouble. The Southern Heavenly Gate glanced at Hong Zhong. A mere slave of a merchant dared to be so rude to him. He could not help but feel angry. He immediately laughed coldly and said, "The Hong Chamber of Commerce is quite famous. However, I'm very curious. Is this how you usually treat your guests? Chapter 38:45. Of course, the reason why the executive of the Hong Chamber of Commerce gave him the spiritual jade card was mostly because of the big shot of the Nan clan. However, Southern Sky Gate rarely visited the Hong Chamber of Commerce on the North Island. Instead, he was roped in by another big merchant with a lot of money. After all, with his position in the soaring pavilion, as long as he was roped in, he could reap huge benefits. There are good and bad guests. If you're a good guest, the Hong Chamber of Commerce will naturally treat you with respect. If you're a bad guest, then there's nothing much to say. In the world of cultivation, the strong are respected. I'm sure you're aware of this. Hong Zhong said calmly. The strong are respected? Southern Sky Gate's eyes flickered. He was surprised to find out that he couldn't see through Hong Zhong's strength. He couldn't rule out the possibility that Hong Zhong was using some kind of secret skill to hide his strength. However, logically speaking, if he couldn't see through Hong Zhong's strength, it meant that Hong Zhong's strength was higher than his. No wonder he was the manager of the Hong Chamber of Commerce's North Island branch. He couldn't be underestimated. Southern Sky Gate's heart trembled, but he didn't plan to give up. After all, he came to the Hong Chamber of Commerce today with ample preparation. Humph. It seems that in your eyes, I'm a bad guest. However, do you know who I am? Southern Sky Gate snorted and said disdainfully, compared to the third brother, Nan Tianyong, Southern Sky Gate was not only stronger, but his position in the soaring pavilion was also much higher. Nan Tianyong's position as the supervising deacon would at most cause people to feel respectful toward him. However, his position in the South Heaven Gate was definitely a hot topic. Not only would people feel respectful toward him, he would also have access to a huge amount of cultivation resources. If anyone was able to befriend him, it would bring them great benefits. Almost half of the merchants in the inner street of the market took the initiative to befriend him. It could even be said that they were trying to curry favor with Southern Sky Gate. There were many people who wanted to rope him in with a lot of money. However, none of these merchants was the flagship business giant of the Hong Chamber of Commerce. Therefore, Southern Sky Gate had long harbored a grudge against the Hong Chamber of Commerce, or strictly speaking, the Hong Chamber of Commerce's North Island branch. Therefore, the South Heaven Gate had purposely paid a visit this time. On the surface, it seemed like it was for Nan Tianyong's sake, but in reality, it was possible that they were trying to use the opportunity to teach the South Heaven Gate a lesson. The Southern Heavenly Gate thought that Hong Zhong dared to be so rude to him because he didn't know his identity. Otherwise, any merchant who knew his identity would treat him like the god of wealth. Why would they put on such a cold face? Unexpectedly, Hong Zhong didn't even raise his head as he said, ranked second among the 3 heroes of the Nan clan, Soaring Pavilion's eldest senior brother, Southern Heavenly Gate. How did you know? The South Heaven Gate's expression changed instantly. If the other party did not know his identity, it would be understandable for him to show such a cold face. But on the premise that he knew his identity as the first senior brother steward of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, he still dared to treat him like this. This was completely unexpected. Soaring Sky Pavilion's eldest senior brother in charge of the new Blue Cloud Pavilion didn't sound much different from Meng Jueguang, who was the eldest senior brother in charge of the new disciples of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. However, the difference in status between the two was like the difference between heaven and earth. As the eldest senior brother in charge of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, Meng Jueguang could only manage a dozen or so new disciples of the Blue Cloud Pavilion. Most of them hadn't even reached the foundation establishment stage. However, as the eldest senior brother in charge of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, apart from the Golden Core stage, Southern Heavenly Gate was in charge of all the inner disciples of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. He had a lot of power, and was in charge of a lot of cultivation resources. It was enough to make countless people envious. The status and power of the two could not be compared at all. Even Hu Yunfeng, the pavilion master of the welcoming pavilion, a person with real power in charge of a department, did not dare to be careless in front of the southern heavenly gate, not to mention a mere Meng Jueguang. Of course, not all the department masters would pay any attention to the eldest senior brother in charge of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, Southern Heavenly Gate. The reason why Hu Yunfeng acted this way was because the welcoming pavilion was ranked last among all the departments. If it was the hall master of a top-notch department like the law enforcement hall, a powerful person like Ramjia would not even look at the Southern Heavenly Gate in the eye. Even so, in the eyes of the shopkeepers in the market, the eldest senior brother in charge of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, Southern Heavenly Gate, was still a hot commodity. He was a god of wealth worth spending a lot of money to win over. No matter which shop he walked into, he would be treated with the utmost respect. Even his own father would not be able to receive such treatment. As long as he bribed the Southern Heavenly Gate, he would take care of his shop's business when he purchased resources for the disciples of the Soaring Sky Pavilion in the future. The profit would be an astronomical figure, enough to make any businessman go crazy with envy. As the shopkeeper of the North Island branch of the Hong Chamber of Commerce, Hong Zhong had never paid any attention to the Southern Heavenly Gate. Now that he had taken the initiative to come to the Southern Heavenly Gate, he still dared to treat him so coldly despite knowing the Southern Heavenly Gate's identity. With such a huge gap, it was no wonder that the Southern Heavenly Gate lost his composure. The fact that Hong Zhong could become the shopkeeper of the branch meant that he was a businessman through and through. How could a businessman treat the god of wealth like this? Looking at the Southern Heavenly Gate's shocked expression, Hong Zhong said with a faint smile, "Although the Hong Chamber of Commerce is not an intelligence organization, it's basic to be observant when doing business on the North Island. No matter what, you are the eldest senior brother in charge of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. Is it strange that I recognized you?" Being recognized by a shopkeeper of the Hong Chamber of Commerce like Hong Zhong was supposed to be proof of one's identity. However, when the Southern Heavenly Gate heard this, his face instantly turned gloomy. "You know my identity, but you never paid any attention to me. Now that you've come to visit me, not only did you not offer me up, you even treated me so coldly. Isn't this a slap in the face?" The Southern Heavenly Gate thought that with his identity, he could at least intimidate the other party a little. However, he did not expect to be slapped in the face by the other party in such a calm manner. The Southern Heavenly Gate felt his face burning with embarrassment. The Southern Heavenly Gate forced his expression and sneered, "Humph, you know my identity, but you still dare to treat me so coldly. It seems that shopkeeper Hong is very confident in himself. I wonder if the higher-ups of the Middle Island of the Hong Chamber of Commerce will have any opinion on this." Although the Hong Chamber of Commerce was one of the few top chambers of commerce on the Five Heavenly Islands, and Hong Zhong, as the shopkeeper of the branch, had enormous power on the North Island. If the higher-ups of the Middle Island knew that he had acted on impulse and harmed the Hong Chamber of Commerce's interests, his position as the branch shopkeeper would probably come to an end. Chapter 3846. In the eyes of any merchant, befriending Southern Sky Gate, a person with real power in the Soaring Pavilion, would bring them great benefits. Even Hong Zhong had the same idea in the beginning, but after secretly observing Southern Sky Gate's character, he immediately gave up on the idea. This article was written by. First, the reason was simple. Southern Sky Gate was a greedy person, and it could even be said that he was greedy beyond measure. Perhaps after befriending him, they could earn a huge profit of tens of thousands of spiritual jades through his power, but the price would be at least 60%, or even more. Although the merchant could still earn 40% of the profit, Hong Zhong, as a shopkeeper of the Hong Chamber of Commerce, had always looked at the person when choosing a partner, not the profit in front of him. Only by choosing the right partner could there be long-term benefits. Otherwise, even if they got a little profit in front of them temporarily, they would definitely have to pay it back tenfold or even 100-fold in the future. This was Hong Zhong's experience after being in charge of the North Island branch of the Hong Chamber of Commerce for decades. Therefore, even though Hong Zhong knew that Southern Sky Gate was very popular and was highly sought after by other shopkeepers, Hong Zhong had never thought of befriending him. Instead, he kept a respectful distance and ignored him. Seeing that Hong Zhong was so fearless, the Southern Sky Gate was stunned. Logically speaking, a shopkeeper like Hong Zhong, who was sent out, was most afraid of the higher-ups of Middle Island, because those people controlled their future and could decide their future development with a single word. However, Hong Zhong in front of him seemed to be very confident and fearless. Or did this guy not believe that he could talk to the higher-ups of Middle Island? Southern Sky Gate quickly came to a conclusion. The reason why Hong Zhong was so fearless was most likely the latter. After all, in the eyes of normal people, although he, the Southern Sky Gate, was the eldest senior brother in charge of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, and was considered to have a high position in the eyes of most people, he was not qualified to talk to the higher-ups of Middle Island of the Hong Chamber of Commerce. Hong Zhong did not take his threat seriously. That was human nature. You don't believe that I have the ability? It doesn't matter. You'll be kneeling down and begging me later. The South Heaven Gate shook his head with a mocking expression and went straight to the point. I've come personally to ask about someone's background, Shopkeeper Hong. I heard that you're quite close to the rogue cultivator, Lin Air, who killed my third brother. The Southern Heavenly Gate thought that after it said this, the other party would definitely retort fiercely, saying something stupid like protecting customer information was the lifeline of the Hong Chamber of Commerce. But unexpectedly, Hong Zhong's reaction was completely different from what he had expected. Hong Zhong didn't overreact or even say a word. He just picked up the teacup. That was all. The meaning of serving tea to send off the guest could not be more obvious. Regarding this question, Hong Zhong, who had always been amiable, did not even have the interest to say a word. He directly served tea to send the guest off. Even the South Heaven Gate's face flushed red with anger. He didn't even say a word. This kind of silent response was even more infuriating than malicious words of ridicule and ridicule. Shopkeeper Hong, I'll call you Shopkeeper Hong for the last time. I advise you to be sensible and cooperate with me. Otherwise, don't blame me for not giving you a chance if you don't want face. The South Heaven Gate forcefully suppressed his anger and said, although he had everything he could rely on for this trip, but if it wasn't necessary, he didn't want to completely fall out with Hong Zhong. After all, the Hong Chamber of Commerce was one of the few top chambers of commerce. If he could make the other party cooperate with him obediently, not only would he be able to obtain more benefits, it would also be more flawless. Therefore, the purpose of his trip today was to use Nan Tianyong's death as an opportunity to demonstrate his power to Hong Zhong. He didn't really want to cause trouble, nor did he want to completely fall out with the other party. I'm giving you face, but you don't want it? Hong Zhong glanced at him in surprise, and then said with a smile that was not a smile, this old man should be the one saying that. You are an uninvited guest, and this old man has already served tea to send you off, but you still have the cheek to stay here and refuse to leave. Who is the one who is being so shameless? After a pause, Hong Zhong said in a serious tone, since you are so thick-skinned, then I'll be frank. I can't help you with your request. Take care. I won't send you off. Old fart, I'm only showing you some respect because you're the manager of the Hong Merchant Group. But since you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, Then don't blame me for being rude. As the South Heaven Gate spoke, his aura suddenly rose to its peak. As if a storm was approaching, the surrounding tables and chairs began to tremble. The foundation completion stage. His strength is stronger than Nan Tianyong's, but he dares to cause trouble here with such little strength. Aren't you looking down on the Hong Chamber of Commerce? Hong Zhong said with a serious expression. Chapter 38:47. If it was just a letter from an ordinary person in the headquarters, Hong Zhong would frown at most. He was a shopkeeper, and he had full authority to manage all the affairs of the Hong Chamber of Commerce in the North Island. Even the higher-ups of Middle Island couldn't tell him what to do. But the problem was that the person who signed the letter had the vital identity of the Hong Shadow Group's Four Directions supervisor of the Hong Clan Chamber of Commerce. His authority was sufficient to supervise the various branches of the Hong Clan Chamber of Commerce, from the shopkeeper to the manservant. Once he was accused of malfeasance and investigated, then no matter how clean and honest Hong Zhong was, a layer of his skin would surely be peeled off, and he might even be stripped of his position as the branch's manager. His hard work of a few tens of years would be destroyed in a single day. Looking at Hong Zhong's gloomy face, Southern Sky Gate couldn't help but feel relieved. He even showed a long-lost complacency on his face. Since becoming the first senior brother in charge of the Soaring Pavilion, the South Heaven Gate had always maintained a poker face, especially not showing any superficial expression that would cause others to look down on him. However, at this moment, he could not help but feel proud of himself. From the moment he entered the room, he had been on the losing end. But now that he had revealed his trump card, the situation immediately turned around. Not only was Hong Zhong, the arrogant old man, shocked, even the four elusive foreign chamberlains were scared silent at this moment. Hong Ying's Four Directions supervisor was a ruthless character that everyone in the Hong Chamber of Commerce feared. Not only was Hong Zhong, who was a normal branch manager, afraid of him, but even guest experts, who had a high degree of freedom, had to give way in front of him. The treatment of the Hong Chamber of Commerce's guardian foreign chamberlains was second to none in the industry. Even if the Four Directions supervising inspector did not have the authority to supervise the guardian foreign chamberlains in name, if they were to be recorded by him and reported to the higher-ups, it would be hard to say if they could continue to be guardian foreign chamberlains in the future. The four guest experts who guarded the North Island branch were usually aloof and looked down on everyone in the North Island. Usually, they could be aloof and look down on anyone in the North Island. However, when it came to their personal interests, they had to keep silent. No matter what level of strength they were at, cultivators were always the most realistic group of people. How about it, old fart? Can you tell me the details of that bullshit Lin Air now? I don't have the patience to waste my time with you. Under the astonishment of the surrounding crowd, the Southern Heavenly Gate sat down on an armchair in the middle of the room as if there was no one else around and leisurely crossed his legs. Everything was under his control. The Southern Heavenly Gate looked at the empty teapot at the side and snorted coldly at the servant at the door. Why aren't you serving me tea? You don't even have the slightest bit of eyesight. Why would the Hong Chamber of Commerce raise a bunch of trash like you? If it was before, the Southern Heavenly Gate would have been chased out by the four guest chamberlains, but now no one dared to make a sound. Even Hong Zhong, the shopkeeper and the representative of the Hong's Chamber of Commerce in the North Island, just glanced at him. But he didn't say anything. The servant at the door shrunk his neck when he saw this. He had no choice but to sneak in and take the teapot away to prepare tea for the Southern Heavenly Gate. By the side, Yuzha could not help being secretly shocked when he saw this scene. The Hong's Chamber of Commerce was an unfathomable place. Now, with just a thin piece of paper, he managed to make the shopkeeper, Hong Zhong, and the four guest chamberlains speechless. Then, he turned the tables around and laughed. This uncle master of the southern heavenly gate, as expected, he was a troublesome person that his cheap master could not compare to. However, at this moment, Yuzha could not help but feel secretly pleased when he saw Hong Zhong, the shopkeeper who did not even bother to hide his feelings, being defeated. Although the one who really stole the starring stone was Lin Air, Hong Zhong, who awarded the starring stone to Lin Air, was also on Yuzha's list of people to hate. However, because he was too weak, he could not find trouble with Hong Zhong even if he hated him. Now, Zhe did not have to do it himself. The uncle master of the southern heavenly gate had already done it for him. Looking at Hong Zhong, the so-called big shot of the Hong's Chamber of Commerce being defeated, and the pitiful expression of him gritting his teeth in hatred but not daring to resist, this feeling was simply too great. There were pros and cons to everything. The identity of the shopkeeper of the North Island branch of the Hong's Chamber of Commerce brought Hong Zhong status and power, but it also placed layers of restrictions on him. With this letter in front of him, if Hong Zhong said no, it would be equivalent to going against Hong Ying's 4 Directions supervising inspector. Although the supervising inspector of the 4 Directions didn't have the power to promote others, if they wanted to ruin someone's future, they could do it with just a word. Therefore, even a powerful shopkeeper like Hong Zhong didn't dare to underestimate them in the slightest. After all, this matter was related to one's future, so who would dare to take it lightly? After a while, the servant brought the tea to the door and carefully looked at the gloomy Hong Zhong. Seeing that Hong Zhong did not say anything, he could only bite the bullet and place the tea on the table beside the southern heavenly gate. Then he bowed and left. The southern heavenly gate poured himself a cup and took a sip in satisfaction. He then smirked at Hong Zhong and said, "You should have thought about what you should do. When you're under someone else's roof, you have no choice but to lower your head. You're already an old man. I don't think you need me to teach you that." The South Heaven Gate never doubted if Hong Zhong would cooperate with them. With the letter from the 4 supervising envoys of the Hong Ying group, it was equivalent to holding an imperial sword. The South Heaven Gate was not worried that Hong Zhong would not cooperate. Hong Zhong was a sensible man. If he did not have the tolerance to adapt to the situation, he would not have been able to become the shopkeeper of the North Island branch. Previously, according to the Southern Heavenly Gate's original plan, unless it was absolutely necessary, he did not plan to use this letter to force Hong Zhong to submit. He originally thought that after Hong Zhong realized his power, he would take the initiative to cooperate with him in a big business deal. Although using someone's power to establish his authority would allow the other party to have a better understanding of his power, making it easier for him to gain a stronger position in the future, if he used his power to bully others too much, it might have the opposite effect. If Hong Zhong held a grudge and refused to cooperate with him, it would be as bad as going too far. However, Hong Zhong, this old man, did not take the face he was given and insisted on stepping on his face. There was nothing he could do to stop him, so he had no choice but to satisfy him. The Southern Heavenly Gate was not as impatient as he claimed to be. He did not seem to have any intention of rushing Hong Zhong. Judging from his expression, he seemed to be enjoying the feeling. Chapter 3848. Seeing the South Heaven Gate's fearless expression after taking out the letter, Hong Zhong fell silent for a moment before he burst out laughing. "It seems like you're certain that I'm going to be the one in the bag." "Oh, isn't that so? Do you still dare to say no to me?" Southern Heavenly Gate sneered, not taking Hong Zhong's question seriously at all. Hong Ying Group's 4 Directions inspectors were very important in the Hong Chamber of Commerce. He knew it clearly when he was in contact with the higher-ups of Middle Island. He easily defeated a branch manager, and not only was the other party unable to resist, he even had to kneel down and beg for mercy in order to save his life. With this letter guarding this place, Even if Hong Zhong was given a few more guts, he would not dare to say half a word of no. Half a word. Hong Zhong raised an eyebrow and shook his head. Then I'll have to disappoint you. I've never said more than half a word. However, I can tell you very clearly that you can leave now. In an instant, the atmosphere in the Hong Chamber of Commerce suddenly froze. Southern Heavenly Gate, who was confident that everything was under his control, had a subtle and even unbelievable expression on his face. You don't understand what I said? Hong Zhong looked at Southern Heavenly Gate's expression. His eyes filled with mockery and coldness. Then, I might as well make it more straightforward and easier to understand. You can leave. You old man, are you suffering from dementia? Southern Heavenly Gate's face instantly turned red, and he couldn't help but say angrily, "Did you read what was written in the letter? How dare you ignore the words of the 4 directions inspectors of the Honging Group and pretend not to see them?" Southern Heavenly Gate thought that after he deliberately mentioned the words that carried great weight in the Hong Chamber of Commerce, even if the other party wasn't as afraid as he imagined, he wouldn't be able to ignore them. However, after hearing his words, Hong Zhong still looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot. He said calmly, "Of course I saw what he said, but so what? As the manager of the North Island branch, I have full authority to decide everything in the North Island of the Hong Chamber of Commerce. Do you think that a mere 4 directions inspector can control me?" F***CK. The Southern Sky Gate stared in bewilderment. Even though he was usually experienced and prudent, he couldn't help but curse at that moment. Even the other people in the Hong Chamber of Commerce, as well as the 4 elusive guest chamberlains, were shocked. One could clearly feel that their aura paused for a moment. They were obviously stunned. There was no problem with Hong Zhong's logic at all. The so-called 4 supervisors of the Honging Group only had the power to supervise the 4 directions branch and had no direct leadership power. Therefore, in theory, if Hong Zhong, the manager of the North Island branch, wanted to do something, the 4 supervisors really couldn't do anything. However, even if the other party couldn't control him, he was still in existence that could stifle his future. Hong Zhong wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Even the manservant at the bottom of the Hong Chamber of Commerce could see the stakes clearly. Hong Zhong, the veteran shopkeeper who had been guarding the North Island branch for decades, was not a match for Hong Zhong. How could he not see it? However, he still did so. This was really incomprehensible. Could it be that shopkeeper Hong didn't even have this little bit of slyness? Just because of Lin Air, he let his emotions affect his decisions to the point of going against a 4 directions supervisor? Isn't this a little too illogical? Sir, you're still lingering here. Looks like you're going to take the hard way instead of the soft way. Hong Zhong's expression remained the same. He picked up his teacup again and smiled. "For guests, can you please send these 2 evil guests off for me?" After hearing that, the Southern Sky Gate and Yuzha's expressions instantly changed. After coming back to their senses, the Southern Sky Gate hurriedly threatened, "This old man has gone crazy. I'd like to see who else will go crazy with him." From the Southern Sky Gate's point of view, even if Hong Zhong had gone crazy and ignored the 4 directions supervisor's threat, the other people, including the 4 guest chamberlains, wouldn't go crazy with him. Don't forget, when it came to personal interests, cultivators were always the most realistic group of people. Unexpectedly, after a brief pause, the 4 powerful auras once again loomed over his head without hesitation. It was obvious that between Hong Zhong and the Southern Sky Gate, the 4 guest chamberlains had already made their choice. The 4 guest chamberlains appeared at the same time, not giving the Southern Sky Gate any chance to resist. They immediately surrounded him and Yuzha, and used the same method they used against Nan Tianyong last time, tossing them out of the window on the 2nd floor. As it wasn't the opening day of the inner street. There weren't many people on the street. However, when two living people were suddenly tossed out of the window, and one of them was an important figure like the Southern Sky Gate, the inner street instantly burst into an uproar, being pointed at by the crowd with mocking gazes. Not only was the authority of the South Heaven Gate embarrassed, even a nobody like Yuja felt ashamed, and was too ashamed to face the others. This time, the two of them finally experienced what Nan Tianyong had felt. The only difference was that Nan Tianyong was alone, while the two of them had teamed up to embarrass themselves. Damned old man. The Southern Sky Gate looked at the calm Hong Zhong at the window on the second floor, and couldn't help but grit his teeth in hatred, his face burning. When he first found out that his third brother, Nan Tianyong, had been thrown out of the Hong Merchant Guild, he had been full of disdain and disdain. He didn't expect that when he was the one being thrown out, and had made ample preparations beforehand, he still couldn't escape from the same embarrassing situation. How could he endure this? As the eldest senior brother, who was in charge of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, he was thrown out of the street from the second floor without being able to resist, and was ridiculed by so many passers-by. Today, the Southern Sky Gate had completely embarrassed him for the rest of his life. As for Yuja, a nobody like him, he couldn't help but curse in his heart. This senior uncle of his was so amazing. He had pressured Hong Zhong and the others to the point where they couldn't even breathe, but he still ended up in such an embarrassing situation. Not only did he fail to find out more about Lin Air's background, but he had also embarrassed himself. This was really a case of going for wool and coming home shorn. The three heroes of the Nan family were so famous, but in the end, when they went up against a giant like the Hong Merchant Guild, it was their third brother and second brother who were thrown out of the street to be humiliated and ridiculed. Yuja finally understood that they were never on the same level. Chapter 38-49. Both of them were smart people. No matter how much they couldn't swallow their anger today, they could only grit their teeth and swallow it. Otherwise, with their strength, if they really fought with so many experts from the Hong Chamber of Commerce, the outcome wouldn't be as simple as losing face. Just as Southern Heavenly Gate and Yuja were planning to escape, a piece of paper floated in front of them. It was the letter that Southern Heavenly Gate had previously shown to intimidate Hong Zhong. The letter was signed by Hong In Group's Four Directions supervising envoy. You want to threaten this old man with just a piece of lousy paper? Do the two of you think my Hong Chamber of Commerce is too simple and dirty? You should take this kind of trash back and read it slowly. Hong Zhong stood by the window on the second floor and smiled faintly. Take care, I won't see you out. The crowd of passers-by cheered loudly. Hong Zhong had been operating in the inner street of the market for several decades, and he had always been kind to everyone. He had a good reputation, and his relationships with people were extraordinary. It was not something that a so-called important figure like the Southern Heavenly Gate could compare to. You've got guts. Old man, remember this. I'll settle this score with you sooner or later. I want to see how long you can be a shopkeeper of a branch. Southern Sky Gate gritted his teeth and cursed. Then, amidst the laughter of the crowd, he and Yuja covered their faces and fled in a sorry state. Looking at the backs of the two fleeing figures, Hong Zhong smiled faintly and muttered to himself, How long can I be a shopkeeper? Of course, I can be a shopkeeper for as long as I want. Old Hong, you've lost so much face this time. That guy definitely won't let this go. You have to be prepared. One of the guest experts reminded him, if everything went according to plan, the South Heaven Gate would surely contact the supervising envoys of the Four Directions after they returned. Hong Zhong's actions would surely incur their displeasure, which would bring him some trouble. Hong Zhong shook his head indifferently. It doesn't matter. There's no need to worry too much about a clown. If they want to scare me with a mere letter, the Nan family's 3 heroes are too naive. Hong In Group, supervising inspector. Hee hee. When the guest experts heard this, they looked at each other and laughed. Their faces were full of mockery. There was nothing wrong with the Southern Sky Gate's logic in using Hong Ying's 4 directions supervising envoys to threaten a branch manager. Normally speaking, no branch manager of the Hong Chamber of Commerce would dare to ignore such a threat. If it was anyone else, the Southern Heavenly Gate would have completed their mission perfectly. However, the Southern Sky Gate had made a fatal mistake. Hong Zhong's position in the Hong Merchant Association was never as simple as a shopkeeper of a branch. He had another, more important identity. His surname was Hong. If Hong Zhong did not mention this identity, the 4 foreign chamberlains would have almost forgotten about it. Now that he thought about it, he understood what Hong Zhong had done just now. However, just because they can't touch me doesn't mean they'll give up. I'm a little worried about that little brother Lin ere now. There was a hint of worry between Hong Zhong's brows. After the previous few encounters, he had already seen the incredible potential in Lin Yi. This potential was something that he had never seen before. As a businessman, Hong Zhong's intuition told him that this Lin Yi was the rare commodity he had been waiting for. If he missed this opportunity, he might not have another one like this in his life. Hong Zhong was very clear that no matter how the Southern Sky Gate tried to provoke the 4 directions supervising envoys, they would never be able to threaten him. However, Lin Yi was different, but that Lin Air was different. Even if he could defeat Yu Jia, and even if he could use that unknown but shocking killing move to instantly kill Nan Tianyong, a peak late-stage Shuji expert, in the end, his potential was far from being developed. His strength was still very weak. If the South Heaven Gate took the opportunity to blow the matter up, forcing the authorities of the Soaring Sky Pavilion to pressure the enforcement hall to dig Lin Air out, it would be hard to tell what would happen to him. After all, with his current strength, there was no way he could withstand the storm. In this situation, even if Hong Zhong wanted to help Lin Yi, there was nothing he could do. Just like the Southern Sky Gate and Yu Jia, he knew nothing about Lin Yi's background. On the other hand, after suffering such a huge loss at the Hong Merchant Guild, the Southern Sky Gate would not let it go so easily. The first thing he did when he returned to the Soaring Pavilion was to write a letter to the 4 directions supervising inspector of the Hong In Group in the Middle Island. There was no need to exaggerate. As long as he truthfully described what happened at the Hong Merchant Guild today, he would not need to intervene. The more powerful a person was, the more they valued their reputation. If Hong Zhong did not take his letter seriously, it was the same as not taking him seriously. Even if the Southern Sky Gate did not try to sow discord, the 4 directions supervising inspector of the Middle Island would definitely attack Hong Zhong for the sake of his reputation. The second thing was to make a big deal out of the death of the 3rd brother, Nan Tianyong. Since Hong Zhong was unwilling to cooperate, then if he wanted to force Lin Air, the individual cultivator of unknown origin, out, he had to borrow the power of the law enforcement hall. However, the enforcement hall was one of the top departments among the 3 great pavilions of the North Island. Its power was not to be underestimated, not to mention the Southern Sky Gate's eldest senior brother in charge of the Soaring Pavilion. Even the elders with weaker power would not be able to influence it. In the entire Soaring Pavilion, the number of people that could force the hall master of the enforcement hall, Ram Jia, to lower his head could be counted on one hand. The person that the Southern Sky Gate was looking for this time was the most powerful one among them, the master of the Soaring Pavilion, Shanghai Tianhua. The Southern Sky Gate had carefully considered the reason why he was looking for Shanghai Tianhua. Shanghai Tianhua was the undisputed leader of the Soaring Pavilion. Now that his 3rd brother, the supervising deacon of the soaring pavilion, had been killed, it was normal for him, the second brother, to seek justice from the first senior brother. No one else would be able to find fault with him. Shanghai Tianhua, the first senior brother in charge of the soaring pavilion, was definitely a super expert that stood at the top of the Pyramid of the North Island. Even though the Southern Sky Gate was the eldest senior brother in charge of the soaring pavilion, it was not easy for him to meet with him. Fortunately, the Southern Sky Gate was not the eldest senior brother in charge of the soaring pavilion for nothing. Due to his position, he would often interact with the higher-ups. Although he did not speak much with them, as time went by, he was able to figure out the whereabouts of these people. Chapter 3850. Hualan Residence was located in the core area of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. It was not a cave that was specifically used for cultivation, but a man-made loft. It was where Shanghai Tianhua lived his daily life. It was named Hualan Residence because there were only 2 people living here. Both of them had taken a word from their names to form the name of the residence. The word Hua was taken from Shanghai Tianhua, while the word Lan was taken from the eldest young mistress, Shangguan Laner. Although the security was extremely tight, the Southern Heavenly Gate managed to enter the Hualan residence in the end by relying on his identity as the eldest senior brother in charge of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. At this moment, Shanghai Tianhua was personally teaching Shangguan Laner how to cultivate. To be able to receive personal tutelage from a top-tier powerhouse like Shangguan Tianhua, in the eyes of any cultivator, that was a blessing that could not be obtained in several lifetimes. Alas, comparisons were odious, this sort of treatment that others could only dream of, but in the eyes of the Shangguan First Miss, it was not attractive at all. Just like now, when the Southern Heavenly Gate was led into the residence by the guards, eldest young Mistress Shangguan was fooling around with the little curly bear. As for Shanghai Tianhua, the dignified Lord Pavilion Master, he was currently sitting at the side with his arms crossed and a bitter smile on his face. He looked like he was having a headache. Due to the distance between them and the fact that his children were not by his side, Shangguan Laner, his only granddaughter, was definitely the apple of Shanghai Tianhua's eye. Even if he did not spoil her, he still doted on her. Under normal circumstances, unless something serious happened, Shanghai Tianhua would stay in the Hualan residence after dark. Not only did he enjoy the company of his family, it was also convenient for him to supervise Shangguan Laner's cultivation. However, there was one thing that gave the Lord Pavilion Master a headache. Although Shangguan Laner had great talent, she had never been interested in cultivation. Even with him, her grandfather, watching over her, it was useless. She was still half-hearted and distracted. Otherwise, if eldest young Mistress Shangguan really wanted to improve with her great talent, coupled with Shanghai Tianhua's personal guidance, he had probably already become an outstanding figure of the Soaring Sky Pavilion's new generation. Seeing the Southern Heavenly Gate enter, Shangguan Laner immediately said, excitedly, "Grandpa, someone is looking for you. Let's call it a day." Shanghai Tianhua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Stop here? Little Lon, you haven't even officially started cultivating today, right? How could you say such a thing?" Hee. Shangguan Laner stuck out her tongue cutely, and the little curly bear next to her also made a face. Shanghai Tianhua had no choice but to give up. The Southern Heavenly Gate was the eldest senior brother in charge of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. Shanghai Tianhua could not ignore it. It could not be helped that Shangguan Laner took the opportunity to skip this lesson. Seeing that Shanghai Tianhua had noticed him, the Southern Heavenly Gate hurriedly knelt on the ground and said respectfully, "Disciple Southern Heavenly Gate pays respect to the Pavilion Master." In front of Shanghai Laner, his only granddaughter, Shanghai Tianhua was just an amiable old man. However, in front of outsiders, he was the top figure standing at the peak of the entire North Island, an out-and-out super powerful big shot. Even if he deliberately restrained his aura, he still made people feel that he was powerful and domineering, making them tremble as if they were walking on thin ice. Shanghai Tianhua waved his hand, signaling the Southern Heavenly Gate to stand up and speak. He said, "What do you want?" It was just a casual question, but because Shanghai Tianhua had regained his majesty, the Southern Heavenly Gate, an expert in the Peak Foundation establishment realm, was frightened from the bottom of his heart. He felt that if he relaxed even a little, he would immediately be drowned in the other party's inadvertent pressure. He held back every bit of aura in his body and stood up from the ground quietly. The Southern Heavenly Gate then answered carefully, "Pavilion Master, I'm here for my third brother." Nan Tianyong, Shanghai Tianhua, slightly raised his eyebrows. Although Nan Tianyong was an unimportant person in his eyes, and he would not normally pay attention to him, as the pavilion master of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, even the slightest movement in the Soaring Sky Pavilion would not escape his eyes. As the supervising deacon of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, Nan Tianyong was killed in the territory of the three pavilions. Even if no one deliberately added fuel to the fire, it had caused quite a stir in the past few days. It was impossible for Shanghai Tianhua not to know about it. Pavilion Master is wise. My third brother, as the supervising deacon of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, was killed by an outsider rogue cultivator in the market. If we don't catch the culprit as soon as possible, I'm afraid it will negatively affect the reputation of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. The Southern Heavenly Gate said cautiously. Even someone as shrewd as him did not dare to play any tricks in front of a top-tier powerhouse like Shangguan Tianhua. All he could do was carefully choose his words to express his intentions. Any other actions would be unnecessary, and he would be trying to act smart and courting death. Shanghai Tianhua nodded his head, slightly. There was nothing wrong with the Southern Heavenly Gate's words. If the matter continued to be delayed, although it would not cause any trouble, it would still damage the reputation of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. That's right, but didn't the disciplinary hall take care of it? Nan Tianyong is the supervising deacon, which means he's one of the disciplinary hall's people. They won't just ignore it. Shanghai Tianhua said calmly. It was true that Nan Tianyong was the supervising deacon of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, but at the end of the day, he was still a member of the disciplinary hall. The Southern Heavenly Gate's heart sank when he heard this. Nan Tianyong was indeed one of the disciplinary hall's people. Normally, the disciplinary hall would attach great importance to the death of one of their own. However, the truth was that although Nan Tianyong's death had been filed, the entire disciplinary hall was just going through the motions. They did not make any big moves. Otherwise, with the terrifying power of the disciplinary hall, they would have dug out the rogue cultivator Lin Air in the past few days. How could there be no movement like now? In the end, whether the disciplinary hall would take Nan Tianyong's death seriously depended on Ram Jia's attitude. If Ram Jia gave the order, then even if they had to dig 3 feet into the North Island, the disciplinary hall would still have a way to dig out Lin Air. However, the problem now was that Nan Tianyong's death was not even worth Ram Jia's attention. To make a big fuss over such an insignificant person, in Ram Jia's eyes, was an extremely ridiculous and stupid thing to do. Since his superior already had such an attitude, it was understandable and normal for his subordinates to feign civility and go through the motions. Ram Jia could ignore it, but as the master of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, Shanghai Tianhua could not completely disregard the reputation of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. Chapter 38:51. From Shanghai Tianhua's words, the Southern Heaven Gate could tell what the pavilion master was trying to say. It seemed like he did not want to interfere with the disciplinary hall. As a matter of fact, just as the Southern Heaven Gate had thought, Shanghai Tianhua did not want to pressure the disciplinary hall, or strictly speaking, Ram Jie, just because of Nan Tianyong's death. Ram Jie was a trusted general that Shanghai Tianhua had personally raised. He had always been highly regarded by the Southern Heaven Gate. Although there had been some criticism in the past, Ram Jie's ability and achievements were obvious to all. Everyone had their own way of doing things. Since Shanghai Tianhua thought highly of Ram Jie, he would not interfere with Ram Jie's business. Otherwise, if he were to interfere too much, not only would it bring no benefits, it would also cause a rift in their relationship. With the wisdom of Shanghai Tianhua, he would not make such a low-level mistake. Furthermore, although Nan Tianyong's death was a big deal in Shanghai Tianhua's eyes, it was still a small matter. His personal intelligence had already reported to him that Nan Tianyong had tried to kill Lin Er in front of the crowd, only to be killed in the end. Based on Shangguan Tianhua's usual way of doing things, even though he was the pavilion master of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, he wouldn't blindly protect his own people. It was normal for cultivators to kill each other, as long as they weren't killed by underhanded means. Even if it was a core disciple of the Soaring Sky Pavilion who died, Shangguan Tianhua wouldn't make a big fuss about it. Deaths were bound to happen in the Jianghu. Since he was not as strong as the pavilion master, there was nothing more to say. He deserved to die. However, it was impossible for Shanghai Tianhua to tell his disciples about this. He could only express his stance by treating it coldly. The Southern Heaven Gate initially thought they had a chance to convince the pavilion master to help them. With just a few words, they would be able to pressure the disciplinary hall, and Lin Er would have nowhere to hide. However, they did not expect Shanghai Tianhua to treat it so coldly in front of the top boss of Shangguan Tianhua. After all, the Southern Sky Gate was only an insignificant figure. Since the big shot had already expressed his stance, no matter how dissatisfied the small figure was, he wouldn't dare to continue dwelling on this issue. Otherwise, if he angered the big shot, it would be hard to say what would happen to him. Pavilion Master, this disciple also knows that the law enforcement hall has its own rules and does not allow external forces to interfere. This disciple has no complaints about this, but this disciple and Nan Tianyong are brothers from the same mother. Now that my brother has been killed, I can't just sit back and do nothing. Even if it's just me, I must avenge him. The South Heaven Gate's eyes were filled with tears as he spoke in a righteous tone. The passionate and righteous expression was obviously an act. However, the South Heaven Gate was not afraid of being seen through by Shanghai Tianhua. Even if it was a fake act, the content of the words was the truth. Whether it was for the reputation of the three heroes of the Nan clan, in order to give their eldest brother, Nan Tianba, a satisfactory explanation. With the Southern Heaven Gate's current situation, they had to find Lin Er and avenge their third brother, Nan Tianyong. You're quite ambitious. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Shangguan Tianhua nodded calmly, but didn't say anything else. Based on Shangguan Tianhua's temperament, no matter how noble or lowly he was, he would always praise hot-blooded and loyal men. However, he had behaved in such a cold manner. It was obvious that he had seen through the South Heaven Gate's plan. The South Heaven Gate's face blushed in embarrassment. Luckily, he was quite shrewd. He managed to remain calm and continued, "Pavilion Master, an inner disciple of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, witnessed with my own eyes that the person who killed my third brother, Nan Tianyong, was a rogue cultivator who called himself Lin Er. The only person who knows the identity of this rogue cultivator is the manager of the Hong Merchant Guild, Hong Zhong. Lin Er, Shanghai Laner, who was playing with the little curly bear, pricked up her ears when she heard the familiar word. Although Lin E had never told her that he was Lin Er, and Shanghai Laner had always been naive. Her intelligence was not low. She could easily guess the relationship between Lin Yi and Lin Yi based on what Lin Yi had asked her to do. Even if she was a bit confused about why Yuzha couldn't recognize Lin Yi in front of him, she could still guess what was going on. She just didn't point it out. Lin Er killed Nan Tianyong. After hearing the South Heaven Gate's words, Shanghai Laner was stunned. Due to the fact that she had been supervised by Shanghai Tianhua for the past few days, the rumors that were spreading in the outside world did not reach her ears. She was stunned when she heard the news. Shanghai Laner was not strong herself, but she had been influenced since she was young. She knew the strength of a supervising deacon of the Soaring Sky Pavilion like the back of her hand. He was at least at the peak of the late-stage Foundation establishment realm. Her junior brother was able to kill him? Shanghai Laner was instantly curious. She did not care about Nan Tianyong's life or death. In comparison, she was closer to her junior brother, Lin Yi. Therefore, it went without saying that she would side with Lin Yi. Previously, Nan Tianyong and Yuzha had been looking for the so-called Lin Er. Since this pair of master and disciple had been plotting against her junior brother, Lin Yi, they were definitely not good people. Nan Tianyong must have pushed them too far. So her junior brother had no choice but to kill them. That must be it. Shangguan Lan wasn't interested in the conversation between her grandfather and the Southern Sky Gate, but now she was interested. She just wanted to gather some information for her junior brother Lin Yi so that she could prepare for anything in advance, so that Lin Yi wouldn't be flustered when the time came. Hongzhong. Shanghai Tianhua hesitated for a moment, then looked at the South Heaven Gate and said, "You went to find him?" Seeing that Shanghai Tianhua seemed to be interested, the South Heaven Gate became excited and said, "Pavilion Master is wise. According to what I know, this shopkeeper Hong not only has a close relationship with Lin Er, but he also added fuel to the fire during the conflict between Lin Er and my third brother, Nan Tianyong. His intentions are extremely sinister. Today, this disciple went to find shopkeeper Hong to inquire about Lin Er's identity, but unexpectedly, not only did this shopkeeper Hong refuse to cooperate with me, but he also rudely ordered several honored guests to kick this disciple out. This is simply not putting our Soaring Sky Pavilion in his eyes. This is intolerable. Please uphold justice for this disciple." At the end of his speech, the Southern Heavenly Gate was filled with righteous indignation. This time, he wasn't faking it. When he recalled the scene of him being thrown down from the second floor, the Southern Heavenly Gate's face couldn't help but burn with embarrassment. Chapter 38:52. Since Shanghai Tianhua had no intention of pressuring the law enforcement hall, if Southern Sky Gate wanted to find Lin Er, they had to turn their attention to Hongzhong again. If they could persuade Shanghai Tianhua to put pressure on Hongzhong, not only could they get the information about Lin Er's identity, but they could also help them vent their anger, killing two birds with one stone. Today's situation at the Hong Merchant Guild was completely out of his expectations. The old man Hongzhong did not even place the personal letter of Hong Ying's 4 Directions supervising inspector in his eyes. However, in the eyes of the Southern Heavenly Gate, no matter how stubborn Hongzhong was, as long as Shangguan Tianhua was willing to speak up, Hongzhong would have no choice but to kneel and lick his boots obediently. Even a strong dragon couldn't suppress a snake in its old haunts, not to mention in front of Shanghai Tianhua, the top boss of the North Island. Even if Hongzhong was a shopkeeper of the Hong Chamber of Commerce, he was far from the title of a strong dragon. He couldn't even be considered a snake. He was at most a worm. You said that Hongzhong was adding fuel to the fire behind the scenes. Do you have any solid evidence? Shanghai Tianhua asked with a slight frown. Speaking of which, between him and Hongzhong, one was the top tycoon in the North Island, and the other was the spokesperson of the Hong's Chamber of Commerce in the North Island. Not only did they have a lot of official cooperation, but they also had a good personal relationship. However, in Shanghai Tianhua's understanding, Hong Zhong had always been kind to people, and he had a good reputation. How could he be adding fuel to the fire in this kind of thing? Pavilion Master, before my third brother had the accident, he was thrown down from the second floor of the Hong Chamber of Commerce by Hong Zhong because of Lin Air. On the day when my third brother fought with Lin Air, he deliberately let Lin Air hide in the Hong Chamber of Commerce for 2 hours. After coming out of the Hong Chamber of Commerce, he was only at the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm, but he was able to kill my third brother, who was at the peak of the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm, with one move after coming out of the Hong Chamber of Commerce. If the Hong Chamber of Commerce didn't do something, who would believe it? There are many witnesses. I dare not make any false report. Please investigate. Southern Sky Gate knelt down again and kowtowed. Lin Yi instantly killing Nan Tianyong had nothing to do with Hong Zhong. However, from the other people's point of view, it was only natural for Hong Zhong to be blamed for this. Otherwise, who would believe that a mere cultivator at the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm was able to kill a cultivator at the peak of the late stage with a single move? Perhaps only the Hong Chamber of Commerce, which had gathered countless treasures, could achieve this. Perhaps they had some kind of consumable treasure that could instantly kill a peak late Foundation establishment expert. Furthermore, before that, Lin Yi had indeed intentionally stayed in the Hong Chamber of Commerce for 2 whole hours. Such a long period of time was more than enough for him to do anything. It was hard not to be suspicious. Shangguan Tianhua took a deep look at Southern Heavenly Gate, who was kneeling on the ground. His expression turned serious. The South Heaven Gate would not dare to hide the truth from him. In that case, the death of Nan Tianyong was definitely related to the Hong Merchant Guild, especially Hong Zhong. After pondering for a moment, Shanghai Tianhua finally said, "All right, I will ask Hong Zhong about this matter." Although he had a good personal relationship with Hong Zhong, however, Shanghai Tianhua had always been clear about public and private affairs. Since Hong Zhong was indeed suspected of adding fuel to the fire, as the pavilion master of Soaring Sky Pavilion, he had to intervene. Hearing this, Southern Heavenly Gate was delighted. He was delighted. As long as Shangguan Tianhua was willing to step forward and ask about this matter, then his objective today would be achieved. As long as Shanghai Tianhua intervened, Hong Zhong would not dare to hide anything from Lin Air's identity, unless he didn't want to stay in the North Island anymore. Just as Southern Heavenly Gate was secretly delighted, Shanghai Laner suddenly said, "Grandpa, it's inappropriate for you to do this." "Inappropriate my ass." The pavilion master of Soaring Sky Pavilion intervened on behalf of his disciple. This was a matter of course. "Inappropriate my ass." Southern Heavenly Gate almost wanted to curse, but when he saw that it was Shanghai Laner who spoke, he had to hold back the curse. Not only could he not show any dissatisfaction, but he had to smile awkwardly. "Oh, what's wrong with it? Little Lon, tell me about it." Shangguan Tianhua asked with great interest. In front of his granddaughter, he was completely an ordinary kind elder. Moreover, although Shanghai Laner did not like to cultivate, she was smart since she was a child. She often had clear and unique views on many things, unlike people in high positions like him, who were sometimes blinded by some interests. Shanghai Laner said seriously, "Grandpa, you once taught me that a gentleman can't complain and cultivate himself." Nan Tianyong couldn't defeat Lin Air and lost his life, but he insisted on blaming Grandpa Hong, who was obviously an outsider. He even asked Grandpa Hong to stand up for him. Isn't this ridiculous? If this precedent is set, then in the future, if any Soaring Sky Pavilion disciple loses outside, Won't you have to stand up for him? Grandfather? Ugh, mistress. Hongzhong can't be considered an outsider. He's the one who's adding fuel to the fire. South Heaven Gate immediately tried to defend himself. Adding fuel to the fire? Do you have any proof? Shanghai Laner rolled her eyes at him and said, "From what you said just now, from the beginning to the end, you can't prove that Grandpa Hong is really involved, right? Or can you guarantee with your life that the killer move that Lin Er used to kill Nen Tianyong was given to him by Grandpa Hong for free?" This, Southern Heavenly Gate, was speechless. How could he have proof for this? He was just using the logical thinking of ordinary people to pour dirty water on Hongzhong. If he really wanted to guarantee with his life, he did not have the guts and courage to do so. Moreover, even if he could prove that Lin Er's killer move was given by Hongzhong, how could he prove that Hongzhong gave it to him for free? In the end, it was all Hongzhong's words. It was an unsolvable problem. Left with no choice, the South Heaven Gate turned to Shangguan Tianhua. There was no way he could refute Shangguan Lan Er's words. Even if he could, he would not dare to do so, as what if Shangguan Lan bore a grudge against him? If this miss were to say a few bad things about him in front of her grandfather, then the future of Southern Heavenly Gate would be bleak. So what if he was the eldest senior brother of the Soaring Sky Pavilion? Shanghai Tianhua could easily make him fall to the ground with a single thought. Fortunately, the Southern Heavenly Gate was relieved that this was only Miss Shangguan's own words. As the pavilion master of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, Shanghai Tianhua would always consider his own interests first. He would not be as naive as this Mississippi. However, Shanghai Tianhua's next words made the Southern Heavenly Gate's jaw drop. Chapter 38:53. But Southern Heavenly Gate still wanted to say something, but Shanghai Tianhua waved his hand and interrupted him. After all, my identity is still too sensitive. If someone with ulterior motives thinks that the three pavilions are dissatisfied with the Hong Chamber of Commerce, the impact will be huge. This was not an excuse. For someone like Shanghai Tianhua, anything he did would be interpreted by people with ulterior motives. If he listened to Southern Heavenly Gate's words and asked Hongzhong about it, it would be easily misinterpreted as him being dissatisfied with the Hong Chamber of Commerce. Therefore, as Shanghai Laner had said, unless Southern Heavenly Gate could produce conclusive evidence, Shanghai Tianhua would not easily step forward. Grandpa, I'm right again. The three pavilions are not allowed to interfere with the business of the Chamber of Commerce. You can't take the lead in breaking the rules. Furthermore, Grandpa Hong treats your granddaughter so well. Xiao Bai was even given to me by him. How can I make things difficult for Grandpa Hong just because of someone's side of the story? Shanghai Laner said proudly. Yes, little Lan is the one who sees things clearly. Shanghai Tianhua chuckled, looking at the grandfather and granddaughter echoing each other, especially after noticing the deeply hidden, unfathomable look in Shanghai Tianhua's eyes. Southern Heavenly Gate finally realized that this pavilion master had no intention of stepping forward and asking questions. He was just putting on an act for them to see. Southern Heavenly Gate even suspected that Shanghai Laner's words were secretly taught by Shanghai Tianhua in front of him. Otherwise, how could a naive girl like Shanghai Laner refute him so flawlessly and hit the nail on the head? What they didn't know was that although Shangguan Tianhua was acting, he had never taught Shangguan Lan to act with him. To be honest, Shangguan Lan had actually stepped forward to say such a thing, and even Shangguan Tianhua himself hadn't expected it. Apart from feeling gratified, Shanghai Tianhua could not help but feel a sense of pity. Although his granddaughter looked naive and innocent at first glance, she was talented and intelligent. However, he was talented, had a high level of comprehension, and was very quick-witted. He could be said to be an excellent cultivation material. It was a pity that he didn't want to improve. He didn't like boring cultivation. What could he do? Since Shangguan Tianhua had already put it this way, the Southern Heavenly Gate knew that it was futile to stay here any longer. In fact, he might even incur the ire of the First Mississippi. He had no choice but to bow respectfully and kneel down, saying, "Then this disciple shall take his leave." Shanghai Tianhua nodded slightly. Then he did not look at him and allowed Southern Heavenly Gate to leave. Looking at Southern Heavenly Gate's back, Shangguan Lan'er stuck out her tongue and said, "Grandpa, that person is so bad. He actually wants to instigate you to deal with Grandpa Hong. He really has bad intentions. He probably learned a lesson from your Grandpa Hong, so he wants to borrow this old man's hand to show off his strength." Shangguan Tianhua laughed and shook his head. Although Southern Heavenly Gate was scheming and shrewd, he was still too inexperienced to play tricks in front of a top-notch big shot like him. This person thinks he can use you as a weapon, Grandpa. He thinks he's smart. In my opinion, you should teach him a lesson and let him have a long memory. Shangguan Lan'er said with a gloating expression. If it were some other big shot with slightly less tolerance, just because of Southern Heavenly Gate's bad intentions, in order to protect their big shot's reputation, they would not let him have an easy time. Of course, Shangguan Tianhua didn't mind at all. At his level, he already had his own way of dealing with things. He would not be angered over such a small matter. Shanghai Tianhua smiled noncommittally and said, "That's not necessary. This Southern Heavenly Gate is not someone who will give up so easily. Since I can't do it, I will definitely think of another way when I return. However, this is not something that I need to worry about." At this point, Shangguan Tianhua suddenly paused, turning to look at Shangguan Lan'er with a strange look on his face. "Little Lan, in the past, you've never been interested in such schemes and plots. Why have you suddenly become so enthusiastic today? Are you also interested in that rogue cultivator Linaire?" "Of course not. I'm obviously standing up for Grandpa Hong." Shanghai Lan'er quickly denied it. She did not dare to let Shanghai Tianhua know about Lin Yi. However, in her hurry, she did not notice that when Shanghai Tianhua said he was interested in the rogue cultivator Lin Air, he used the word also. Looking at the entire 3 pavilions, there were only a handful of people who could arouse the interest of the master of the soaring pavilion. It was proven that none of them were ordinary people. For example, the current master of the law enforcement hall, Ram Jia. Based on Hong Zhong's character, Shanghai Tianhua believed that he would not deliberately help Lin Air to deal with Nan Tianyong. However, it was a fact that Lin Air killed Nan Tianyong in a second. An expert at the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm was able to kill an opponent 4 levels higher than him. No matter what method he used, it was already a miracle. It was no wonder that Shanghai Tianhua, the top big shot of the North Island, would be interested in Lin Air. The next day, under the instruction of Miss Shangguan, Little Curly Bear brought the information and sneaked to Lin Yi's first cave residence at the foot of the mountain. The second of the 3 heroes of the Nan family, the senior brother in charge of the soaring pavilion, Southern Sky Gate, Lin Yi looked at the situation described in the letter by Shanghai Lan'er and could not help but be slightly surprised. He secretly sighed that Yuzha really did not give up. He had just killed Nan Tianyong and immediately pulled over an even more powerful Southern Sky Gate. Previously, using the true Qi bomb to kill the defenseless Nan Tianyong was already Lin Yi's limit. If it was the more powerful Southern Sky Gate, or if they came prepared, then other than hiding far away, there was really no other way. However, what made Lin Yi rather touched was that Hong Zhong had only met him twice, but he was so protective of him. Without saying a word, he stepped on Nan Tianyong and the two heroes of the Nan family, and even almost fell to the point where the soaring pavilion's master, Shanghai Tianhua, came out to pressure him. This kind of favor was really touching, although Lin Yi also knew that Hong Zhong must have done this mainly for his own sake. And Hong Zhong really did not know the details of his identity. No matter what, he still had to accept this favor. It seemed that he would have to take care of Hong Zhong's business in the future. For Lin Yi, if he could establish a stable cooperative relationship with an experienced and reliable business tycoon like Hong Zhong, it would also be a win-win situation for both sides. In addition to the Southern Sky Gates visit last night, Shanghai Laner also analyzed the reactions of the higher-ups of the Soaring Pavilion and the Law Enforcement Hall to Lin Yi in the letter. Chapter 38:54. After reading her detailed analysis in the letter, Lin Yi finally had a clear idea of the current situation. He wouldn't be caught off guard when he actually encountered Yuzha and the Southern Sky Gate, which would cause him to reveal his weakness. Other than that, Miss Shangguan also mentioned something that Lin Yi was concerned about. It was the trump card that Su Lingchong and Meng Jueguang prepared for Meng Tong. Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill. It can let Meng Tong level up. Lin Yi couldn't help but frown. This effect was even stronger than the Foundation Establishment Pill, but his instinct as a refiner told him that there was something strange about this Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill. Even the practitioners on Sky Class Island didn't know about the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill, and Lin Yi had only been here for 2 months. Of course, he wouldn't have heard of it, but logically speaking, the stronger the effect, the stronger the side effects. The Foundation Establishment Pill was already heaven-defying, and the reason why it didn't have any side effects was because the miracle Dr. Zhang Liju had spent a lot of time researching and improving it. This Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill was even stronger than the Foundation Establishment Pill. So unless the refiner who created this pill had skills even higher than Zhang Liju, the side effects would definitely be terrifying. When he was in the common world, Lin Yi might have believed that there was someone on Sky Class Island who was better than Zhang Liju in elixir refinement, but now that he had seen Zhang Liju's legendary status on Sky Class Island, he had completely dispelled that thought. According to Ku by Shi Xiang, miracle Dr. Zhang Liju's skill in elixir making was unprecedented, and no one could compare to him at all. Otherwise, how could he, a practitioner from the common world with no background, be able to stand in the middle island of Sky Class, where there were so many strong practitioners? Become a top-level master? From this, one could deduce that the refiner who created the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill was at most on par with Zhang Liju. It was impossible to surpass him. From the looks of it, this group of people are already unscrupulous in order to regain their face. However, I wonder if Meng Tong knows the side effects of this. Lin Yi shook his head speechlessly. In his opinion, Meng Tong, this idiot, was most likely kept in the dark by Su Lingchong and Meng Jueguang. Otherwise, if he knew that there were severe side effects, even if he knew that he could directly level up by 1 level, he wouldn't be able to do so. Normal people wouldn't dare to joke around with their lives and future. However, even though Meng Tong had leveled up, he was still not much of a threat to Lin Yi. What surprised Lin Yi was that since Su Lingchong had the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill and Meng Tong's injuries were already healed, he should have been able to use it long ago. Meng Tong, on the other hand, had been keeping a low profile for the past few rounds. Lin Yi could see that the guy was still at the early phase of Foundation establishment, even though his body condition was much better than before after using some kind of medicine. There were no signs of him breaking through at all. Could it be that these people wanted to hide the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill until the end, and then give him a surprise at the critical moment? Lin Yi thought about it carefully. If this continued, it was quite possible. There were 6 stages in the newcomer exam. and although the challenge stage was intense, the strong ones would be able to get a lot of points. However, its influence on the rankings was far from being able to determine the outcome. There was only one thing that could have an absolute influence on the ranking. That was the final stage. Although Lin Yi had this guess in his heart for safety's sake, he still had to remind Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai so that they could be mentally prepared in advance, so that they wouldn't be at a disadvantage when they faced Meng Tong, who was at the early phase of foundation building. Avoiding everyone's eyes and ears, he quietly sent the little curly bear away. When Lin Yi returned to his cave abode, he found that the cave abode at the foot of the mountain was in a hubbub. Almost all the newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion had come out of their cave abodes and gathered together, discussing spiritedly. What's going on? Could it be that they're announcing some new rules for the newcomer exam? Lin Yi could not help but be puzzled. In the past 2 months, this was the first time he had seen such a bustling place. Not only were Meng Tong and the others making a racket, it seemed that even Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai were among them. When Lin Yi approached the group of people with a head full of confusion, he was stunned with just a glance. Among the newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion, there was actually a woman, and a pretty one at that. A woman. After coming to Heaven Island for 2 months, this was the second woman Lin Yi had seen. No, strictly speaking, this was the first woman he had seen since coming to Heaven Island. Although Shanghai Laner was cute and innocent, she was at most a girl. She did not have the temperament of a mature woman. However, this woman in front of him, after 2 months of integration, even a newcomer like Lin Yi had a general understanding of the situation in Heaven Island. Under normal circumstances, except for people like Shanghai Laner, the female cultivators of the 5 major islands in Heaven Island were generally concentrated in the West Island. This was an unwritten rule when teleporting, and it was also a rule within the local cultivator tribes. Unless it was the 2nd or 3rd generation of cultivators of each island, there were generally no exceptions. This also led to the gathering places of cultivators in the North Island, where there were often more men and less women, and it was extremely unbalanced. It was even more so in the Welcome Pavilion. If it were not for Shanghai Laner, the young lady who would occasionally come over to show her face, the newcomers would not even think about seeing a woman all year round. The self-control of cultivators was far beyond that of ordinary people. Even many people had already become indifferent to the pleasures between men and women. Under normal circumstances, they would not think about women, but most of the cultivators were still normal people after all. It was natural instinct for the opposite sex to be attracted to each other. As the saying goes, after mixing with men for a long time, even if you see a sow, you will feel that you are handsome. What's more, the one who appeared in front of everyone now was a living woman, and she could be considered a beauty. But why would such a woman come here? When Lin Yi could not help but feel puzzled, Senior Brother Ku Bai, Xiao Ran, and Xiao Hongkai had already squeezed to his side. Lin Yi could not help but ask, "What's going on? Could it be that a woman from a family brought her here to play?" This was the most normal speculation. If it was not like Shanghai Laner who came to play, could it be that she was a new disciple of the Welcome Pavilion? Chapter 38:55. More importantly, Lin Yi could clearly see the woman's strength. She was an expert at the peak of the early stage of the foundational building realm. Although Lin Yi's golden finger was limited after he obtained the heavenly axiom, he could still see the levels of cultivators who were weaker than him. Putting aside the 2 stewards, Meng Jueguang and Senior Brother Ku Bai, as well as Lin Yi, who had hidden his strength, this woman could easily look down on everyone. With such strength, why would she come to the welcoming pavilion? She could directly enter the 3 great pavilions. However, Senior Brother Ku Bai's answer stunned Lin Yi. "Junior Brother Lin, you're wrong. This woman's name is Murong Zhen. She's not here to play. From today onwards, she's a newcomer to the Blue Cloud Pavilion. Huh. Lin Yi could not help but be stunned. This situation was the most impossible possibility, but he did not expect it to come true. What was going on? It had been more than 2 months since then, but a disciple was added halfway through. Moreover, it was a female disciple, and a female disciple at the peak of the early stage of the foundational building realm. I don't know why this female disciple was suddenly sent here. Anyway, this is a special case, and the higher-ups tacitly approved it. After a pause, Senior Brother Ku mysteriously whispered to Lin Yi and the others, "It's said that this woman has a powerful background. She's a distant relative of Elder Morong from the Soaring Pavilion. She's been in her hometown for a long time, but because she's quite strong, she was brought here recently." Senior Brother Kubai's words did not dispel Lin Yi's doubts. Instead, he became even more puzzled. Since she was a relative of Elder Morong from the Soaring Pavilion, even if she was a distant relative, she could be considered a real second or third generation cultivator. With her current strength, if she wanted to join the 3 great pavilions, there was no need for her to go through the trouble of coming to the welcoming pavilion. Even if she really wanted to go through the motions, she should have gone to the Soaring Pavilion. Why did she come to the Blue Cloud Pavilion? For no reason. There was probably something strange about this. Just as Lin Yi, Senior Brother Kubai, and the others were discussing, they heard the other newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion suddenly quiet down. Following that, they saw the crowd part to the side. This woman, who was the center of attention, walked gracefully in front of Lin Yi. "Are you the Lin Yi they were talking about? Let me introduce myself. My name is Morong Zhen. If you don't mind, you can call me Zhen." Morong Zhen's pretty eyes were filled with lust as she extended her slender hand to Lin Yi. Gulp! The crowd couldn't help but swallow their saliva. In their hearts, they were all envious of Lin Yi's luck with women. To be able to shake hands with Morongzhen was a blessing that could not be obtained in a few lifetimes. Not only was Morongzhen a beauty, but she was also a powerful female cultivator. There were even well-informed people who said that her family background was unfathomable and that she was a true third-generation cultivator. It was impossible for Morongzhen not to become the center of attention when she was 3 different people. If he could gain her favor, not only would he be able to win the heart of a beauty, but he would also be able to become the son-in-law of a dragon. From then on, he would be able to reach the sky in a single bound, and he would be able to save a lot of effort. Before Lin Yi arrived, many people, including Meng Tong, tried to strike up a conversation with her. Unfortunately, Morongzhen did not even look at them, let alone take the initiative to shake hands with them. However, as soon as Lin Yi showed up, Morongzhen took the initiative to introduce herself. She even took the initiative to extend her hand. The difference in treatment between the two was like heaven and earth. Meng Tong and the others were heartbroken. At first, the crowd thought, since Morongzhen took the initiative, Lin Yi would definitely take advantage of the situation without hesitation. He would grab her slender hand and enjoy his luck with women. But what made everyone's jaws drop was that Lin Yi didn't do anything about it. "Hello, I am Lin Yi." Lin Yi nodded with his arms crossed. He had no intention of shaking hands with her and responded calmly. F***CK. There must be something wrong with this pretentious guy's brain. Didn't they say this guy is a lecher? Why is he rejecting her when she's right in front of him? Is he addicted to acting tough? Meng Tong and the others were in an uproar. All of them were surprised, and their faces were filled with schadenfreude. Fortunately, Lin Yi was sick in the head. Otherwise, if he really took the opportunity to hook up with the great beauty Morongzhen, then all of them would be heartbroken. Morongzhen obviously did not expect Lin Yi to react this way. She was slightly startled and chuckled awkwardly. She then retracted her hand that was reaching out to Lin Yi due to the scarcity of women. Ever since she came to the three great pavilions, no matter where she went, she was undoubtedly the center of attention. Even in the circle of the second generation of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, she could easily attract the attention of many young masters, and this even included Su Lingchong, the young master who was extremely valuable. Originally, everything was wonderful. Just when Morongzhen thought it would always be wonderful because of a party in Huayang House, just because of a moment of anger, the situation suddenly took a turn for the worse. Not only did she lose the attention of many young masters, she also became the target of public criticism. Chapter 38:56. If it were anyone else here, Morongzhen wouldn't even need to take the initiative to extend her hand. Just a simple glance from her would make them kneel down and lick her feet. No one would be as cold as Lin Yi, not even willing to extend his hand. Even though it was a little awkward, Morongzhen quickly regained her composure. She said coquettishly, "In the future, we'll all be newcomers to Blue Cloud Pavilion. I'm just a weak woman who has no one to rely on. Brother Lin, you must remember to take care of me." The coquettish voice seeped into their bones, and since they hadn't seen a woman in a long time, even these practitioners with strong self-control couldn't help but feel their hearts fluttering. They wanted nothing more than to be in Lin Yi's place and pull this soft beauty into their arms, taking care of her. Lin Yi's response to this was a non-committal smile. He didn't have any intentions of responding at all. This scene once again made everyone's jaws drop. If they had thought that Lin Yi was stupid and didn't know how to appreciate favors, now they didn't think that way anymore. When they recalled the rumors that Lin Yi had countless girlfriends in the secular world, the crowd could not help but think that it was not that Lin Yi did not want to bother with the beautiful woman, Morongzhen. He was just acting cool out of habit and preparing to play hard to get as high and mighty cultivators. Even if it was difficult for them to gain the favor of female cultivators of the same cultivation level, their status among ordinary people was undeniable. If they really wanted to, people like them would definitely not lack women. Naturally, they had their own way of dealing with women, playing hard to get. As long as the situation was controlled well, not only could this move leave a deep impression on the other party, it was also more useful than trying to please them. However, the prerequisite for using this move was that the person himself must possess sufficient attractiveness. In the world of cultivation where the strong were revered, the person must possess sufficient strength. At the same time, the person must also possess a powerful background. Otherwise, it would only produce the opposite effect. In terms of strength, although Lin Yi's strength was not bad compared to the newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion, he was only in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. Morongzhen, on the other hand, was an expert in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. She was superior. In terms of background, Lin Yi was just a grassroots newcomer in the secular world. Even if everyone present was a grassroots loose cultivator, their background and strength were much better than Lin Yi's. After all, no matter how poor they were, as local cultivators, they still had friends and relatives. Moreover, this Morong beauty was rumored to be related to Elder Morong of the Soaring Pavilion. Her background was unreachable to anyone here, let alone a weakling like Lin Yi who had come from the common world. Let's wait and see. Sooner or later, this pretentious old man will shoot himself in the foot. When that time comes, it'll be interesting when Beauty Morong steps on him. Meng Tong sneered. Beside him, Li Zhengming couldn't help but grin when he heard this. Did Boss Lin Yi really have some thoughts about this Morongzhen? He wasn't sure, but at least he knew one thing. If they really fought, Boss Lin Yi would definitely trample his opponent to death in a matter of minutes. There was no doubt about this. Therefore, in his opinion, Meng Tong's self-indulgent thoughts could only be described with one word: naive. However, he obviously wouldn't say this out loud. He just cooperated with the cold sneer. Of course, the target of this sneer was not Lin Yi, but the newcomer Meng Tong. Seeing that Lin Yi didn't respond to her, Morongzhen was a little annoyed. This guy, why didn't he take the initiative to give face? The reason why she took the initiative to express her goodwill to Lin Yi was because she saw that Lin Yi was stronger than everyone else. Moreover, the other newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion seemed to be quite afraid of him. She felt that this person was not simple and could be used. She originally thought that this kind of thing would be a piece of cake for a great beauty like her. She thought that she could easily make Lin Yi kneel under her skirt. She didn't expect that Lin Yi would be so unreasonable. He turned a blind eye to her in public twice. Did this guy think that he was a super rich young master like Su Lingchong? Could it be that he really wanted a great beauty like her to take the initiative to throw herself at him? You're just an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator with no background. It's already a blessing that this lady is willing to look at you for a few lifetimes. And you want this beauty to throw herself at you? Bah, you're not worthy. Although she was annoyed in her heart, there were so many people watching. Moreover, this was the first time she appeared in front of everyone. Morongzhen didn't want to lose her poise and affect her image. She had not given up yet. Even if she was inhumanely sent to Blue Cloud Pavilion as a newcomer, Morongzhen didn't have the slightest intention of giving up. She still wanted to stay in Welcome Pavilion for a period of time. She wanted to take the opportunity to recruit a few powerful newcomers with a bright future. She wanted to prepare to deal with Shanghai Laner in the future. If she wanted to deal with Shanghai Laner, the high and mighty lady, the newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion would definitely not be of much use. However, they were not completely useless. When the time came, she could set up a plan to use them as cannon fodder. Because of Lin Yi's cold reaction, Morongzhen was embarrassed and annoyed. Next to her, Meng Jueguang, the senior who was in charge, took the initiative to help her out of this predicament. All right, everyone quiet down. Let me formally introduce everyone. Meng Jueguang pretended to be gentle and smiled at Morongzhen. Then he loudly introduced, "From today onwards, Lady Morong is officially a newcomer of Blue Cloud Pavilion. Like everyone else, she will be participating in the newcomer assessment. As for the assessment that she has already gone through, there is no need to make up for it alone." After a pause, Meng Jueguang continued, "Also because the 15 caves at the foot of the mountain are already full, according to the orders of the higher-ups, we are to build a wooden house for Lady Morong as a temporary residence." Hearing this, everyone looked at each other. If they said that they weren't the least bit confused about Morongzhen's arrival, they would definitely be lying. With Morongzhen's strength and background, if she wanted to join the 3 great pavilions, it would be a simple matter. The fact that she joined Welcome Pavilion halfway through was already strange enough. Moreover, she did not join Soaring Sky Pavilion, but Blue Cloud Pavilion. Because of this, even if she left Welcome Pavilion in the future, according to the 3 great pavilions rules, she could only become an inner disciple of Blue Cloud Pavilion and not an inner disciple of Soaring Sky Pavilion. The difference in treatment between the two was huge. For Morongzhen, who was supposed to become an inner disciple of Soaring Sky Pavilion, this was simply inhumane and merciless suppression. Chapter 38:57. As long as they calmed down and thought about it, they would be able to figure out that there was more to this than meets the eye. It was highly possible that Morongzhen had offended someone important, which was why she was treated this way. Because of this, Lin Yi had already thought about this problem. That was why he distanced himself from Morong Zhen. He did not want to get involved in the fight between these important people. However, the others did not think the same way. Morong Zhen was a beautiful woman. Even if they had all kinds of speculations, they could not help but be attracted to her. They could not control themselves. Even if Morong Zhen had offended someone important, it must be someone from the Soaring Sky Pavilion. They would be going to Blue Cloud Pavilion in the future, so it did not matter. Plus, it might even be a training experience for her elders. Looking at everyone's expressions, Meng Jueguang sighed and said, "From my personal standpoint, I also feel that this is somewhat unfair, but this is, after all, an order from the higher-ups. No one can change it. Fortunately, Lady Morong is already at the peak of the early stage of the foundational building realm. She is destined to have a bright future ahead of her. As for the newcomer assessment and the cave, I believe she will not be too concerned about it. I will have to trouble you for now." Although Meng Jueguang was pretending to sigh, half of it came from his heart. After all, even heroes have a weakness for the charms of a beautiful woman. No matter how scheming and shrewd Meng Jueguang was, he was still a hot-blooded man. The temptation of a beautiful woman like Morong Zhen was very great. Under everyone's watchful eyes, after hearing what Meng Jueguang said, Morong Zhen's face was filled with tears. However, she still pretended to be strong and said, "Senior Meng, from today onwards, I am no longer Lady Morong. I am just an ordinary newcomer to Blue Cloud Pavilion. You can just call me Junior Sister. Also, I have no problem with the newcomer assessment and the cave. Please do not worry about me." With just a few simple sentences, almost every man, including Meng Jueguang, was captivated by this woman. Compared to acting cute and cute, a woman like her, who was obviously weak but pretended to be strong, was more likely to arouse a man's desire to protect her. Men could not help but feel protective towards her. This woman was really good at acting. Lin Yi could not help but secretly pout. Although he did not know Morong Zhen, who had appeared out of nowhere, and there was no enmity between them, his instincts told him that this woman was definitely not as weak and harmless as she appeared to be. In the secular world, Lin Yi had come into contact with all kinds of women, and he knew how to treat people, so he had a way to read people. Morong Zhen's eyebrows were very wide apart. She was no longer a virgin. Whether it was the space between her eyebrows or the way she walked, she gave off a coquettish aura. If his judgment was correct, this woman's nightlife should be frequent and chaotic. Heaven-ranked Island was not as open as the secular world. There were still a lot of ancient customs, and they were very strict about keeping a distance between men and women. Under such a background, a woman like Morong Zhen could not be considered a good person at all. Right now, Lin Yi was wholeheartedly focused on cultivating and leveling up. He would go to Zhongdao and find Zhang Liju. He didn't have time to waste with this woman. However, what Lin Yi didn't know was that for some narrow-minded women, his behavior of keeping a respectful distance from them was a sign of respect. That was enough to make people hate him. All right, if there's nothing urgent, then let's show our manly spirit. Come and help build a house for our junior sister Morong. Meng Jueguang called out to everyone. All right. In order to leave a good impression in front of Beauty Morong, the rookies of Blue Cloud Pavilion scrambled to be the first. They were afraid of falling behind. Xiao ran, Xiao Hongkai, and the others didn't follow the others immediately. Instead, they stayed and waited for Lin Yi's instructions. Let's go. Since we're all rookies of Blue Cloud Pavilion, let's go help as well. Lin Yi smiled faintly. He didn't want to interact too much with this Morong Zhen, but they were all rookies of Blue Cloud Pavilion. Even if it was just out of consideration for his face, he had to help. Of course, with so many people scrambling to go, even if Lin Yi and the others went, they would only be there to help. Building a wooden house was just a small matter for practitioners like them. In just half an hour, under the efforts of the rookies of Blue Cloud Pavilion, a wooden house was erected in the empty space in front of the cave at the foot of the mountain. Although it was a little rough and the feeling of living in it wouldn't be great, apart from the spiritual energy, the requirements of a cultivator's external environment were not high, so they could make do with it. As for the spiritual energy, with Morongjeon's strength at the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm, even the best cave at the foot of the mountain, the first cave was far from enough to satisfy her cultivation needs, let alone the small wooden house. Therefore, in theory, to Morongjeon, the effects of the caves and the small wooden house were the same. They were close to zero. Of course, the small wooden house was only temporary to her. If she intended to fight in the upcoming competition, the one who would stay in the small wooden house might be an unlucky soul. Regarding this point, the Clear Cloud Pavilion's new disciples who were mesmerized by Morongjeon had yet to react. All they could think of at the moment was how to win Morongjeon's favor. As long as they could please Morongjeon, not only would they gain the beauty's favor, but they would also have a backer. Why not? Putting aside Morongjeon's powerful background, she was a true expert at the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. With this kind of strength, she could easily defeat all the rookies of Welcome Pavilion, including Lin Yi. Even if they were suspected of living off a woman, if they could find a way to hug such a thick thigh, the situation would be wonderful. After building the wooden house for Morongjeon, the rookies of Blue Cloud Pavilion quickly dispersed, except for a few who wanted to please Morongjeon with ulterior motives. They still had to prepare for the next round of the competition, and they still had to spend vital chi to cultivate the spiritual herb seeds. There were many things they needed to worry about, so they did not have much time to waste. As for Morongjeon, a beauty who had descended from the sky, to most of them, she was merely a feast for their eyes at most. With their abilities and conditions, it was completely unrealistic for them to win the heart of the beauty. No matter how tempted they were, they still knew where they stood. Chapter 38:58. There were countless examples of brothers falling out because of a woman. Although Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai had good characters, if they were to be seduced by this woman and sow discord between them, it would be hard to say what would happen next. Lin Yi had to be on guard against this, so he had to give them a heads up. Don't worry, boss. We'll do whatever you want. Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai nodded without hesitation. Admittedly, after spending so much time in the Welcome Pavilion with men, Morongjeon was more or less attractive to them, but it was not to the point where they would fall for her. Needless to say, Xiao Ran had seen all kinds of fickleness in the secular world since he was young. His calmness, rationality, and self-control were unquestionable. On the other hand, although Xiao Honkai looked pure and hot-blooded, it could be seen from the way he dealt with Meng Tong during the challenge that he was a meticulous person. He was not someone who would be easily taken advantage of. Back in the cave abode, Lin Yi habitually entered the space in the jade pendant. Apart from his daily cultivation, his most important task now was to take care of the 2 heart-devouring exquisite grasses that had just sprouted. As these were seeds cultivated in batches by the Spirit Medicine Nursery using a special method, they belonged to the category of plants that were congenitally deficient. Furthermore, the method of instilling vital energy into them changed their growth cycle, which was a form of destruction to the spiritual medicine seeds that were already lacking in vital energy. Therefore, normally speaking, the quality of the spiritual medicine cultivated in this way was poor and could not reach the average standard. It was rare for him to obtain 2 heart-devouring exquisite grasses seeds, but in the end, he could only cultivate 2 malnourished heart-devouring exquisite grasses. This result was clearly unacceptable to Lin Yi. Fortunately, the space in the jade pendant was filled with sufficient spiritual energy. to a large extent, it made up for his congenitally deficient inferiority. Although the quality was not very good, it could still reach the average standard. What Linny needed to do now was to continue taking care of these two heart-devouring exquisite grasses. Then he could start to refine the foundation-building pill. Apart from the two stalks of heart-devouring exquisite grass, Lin-Yi didn't directly hand over the rest of the seedlings that had sprouted in the space of the jade pendant to exchange for points. Instead, he left them here and returned the seedlings in batches. The reason why they had to be sent in batches was because this was also to avoid arousing suspicion. After all, when the others took the seedlings back, they didn't have a unique golden finger like Lin Yi's jade space. They wouldn't be able to grow the spiritual medicine seedlings in their hands at all, so they could only hand them all over at once. If he really did that, when that time came, Xiao Ran, Xiao Hongkai, Li Zhengming, and even Zhong Pingliang from the Soaring Pavilion would hand over 10 or more seedlings at once under the background that everyone else couldn't even grow a single seed. It would be impossible not to attract attention. When that time came, if someone really wanted to investigate, not only would the secret of them cultivating the spiritual medicine seedlings be exposed, but, more importantly, Zhong Pingliang and Li Zhengming might also be exposed as spies. That would be troublesome. So, for the sake of safety, Linny could only choose to make it a little more troublesome and let them hand over the seedlings in batches, as long as they didn't meet at the same time. Moreover, if each person hid a few seedlings, it wouldn't matter even if their survival rate was much higher than the others. Back then, the sissy manager of the Spirit Medicine Nursery had already said that cultivating spiritual medicine seedlings not only depended on strength and skill, but also luck. If a few people had a higher survival rate, the others could only be envious. At most, they would suspect that these people had mastered some key tricks or something, but they wouldn't think too much about it. The spiritual medicine seedlings of Xiao Ran and the others. Lin-Yi had them hand over the seedlings in batches. He himself had 39 seedlings other than the heart-devouring exquisite grass. He didn't hand them over in batches, but kept them in the jade space, planning to take them out at the end. When that time came, many people would be blinded, especially people like Kang Mingming, who was waiting to see him make a fool of himself. Lin-Yi was looking forward to it. At night, when Lin-Yi was cultivating, his heart suddenly moved. Someone was touching his cave house's restriction, looking for him at this time. Could it be that Li Zhengming had some new information? This was Lin Yi's first reaction. But when he opened the door and saw the person standing in front of him, Lin-Yi couldn't help but be stunned. "Big brother Lin, my wooden house is transparent. Can I borrow your cave house to take a bath? The weather is so hot, and my body is so sticky, it's uncomfortable." Murongzhen was wearing thin clothes, leaning against the door, and her eyes were seductively looking at Lin-Yi. Lin-Yi looked at her coldly and raised his eyebrows. "What is this honey trap?" "I'm sorry, I don't think there's water in my cave house." Lin-Yi rejected her calmly. He had to admit that Murongzhen was quite pretty. Even though Lin-Yi was used to seeing all kinds of beautiful women, he had to admit that she was one of a kind. However, not only was Lin-Yi not interested in this kind of woman, but he was even more vigilant. Once he got too close to this woman, needless to say, he would be in trouble, and it would be impossible for him to avoid her. Lin-Yi didn't know why this Murongzhen was trying to seduce him like this, but there was one thing he was sure of. There was definitely something fishy going on, and this woman was definitely up to no good. Seeing that Lin-Yi's reaction was as cold as during the day, Murongzhen, who thought that she would be able to make him submit, couldn't help but be stunned again. After half a day with her ability, it was easy for her to find out the current situation of the newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion. From her point of view, although Meng Tong had Meng Jueguang backing him, in terms of strength, he was still far inferior to Lin Yi's group. Summing up all the things that had happened to Lin Yi, she realized that this newcomer from the secular world was not only far stronger than the other newcomers, but his potential was also not to be underestimated. Just by relying on his own strength, he was able to make Meng Jueguang, the steward, helpless. How could this be something that an ordinary person could do? This man was not simple. This was Murong Zhen's judgment of Lin Yi after summing up the information provided by the newcomers. Because of this, after being given the cold shoulder during the day, she had to swallow her pride and take the initiative to seduce Lin Yi at night when there was no one around. Chapter 38:59. Lin Yi, who seemed to be quite capable, was obviously a good choice. Moreover, Lin Yi had a grudge against Su Lingchong, so he was naturally on her side. As for how to get Lin Yi on their side, it was an easy task for Morongzhen. For a beauty like her body was the best method. Morongzhen would never complain about having too many guests under her veil. If it was necessary, she would not even mind giving the other party a taste of sweetness, just like the current situation. From her point of view, for a man like Lin Yi who liked to act cool, it was understandable that he was so cold to her in front of so many people during the day. If he acted like a pervert, it might damage the image he had built up previously. Now, in the dead of night, there was no one around, and she, a beautiful woman, had taken the initiative to come to him. There should be no need for him to pretend anymore. In the end, it was completely out of Murong Zhen's expectations. It was just the two of them, a man and a woman. She had already hinted so openly, but Lin Yi was still pretending and did not hurry to snatch her in. Murong Zhen couldn't help but suspect that there was something wrong with this guy's head. Or could it be that he was sick in that aspect and was not interested in women? Otherwise, there was no reason for him to resist her temptation. Murong Zhen quickly calmed herself down when she saw Lin Yi looking at her coldly. She did not give up and licked her lips seductively. She said coquettishly, "If there's no water, we can go outside and get it. Brother Lin, you can't possibly bear to see a weak lady like me fetch water by herself, right? My body is sticky right now. It's really uncomfortable if I don't bathe." If it was any other newcomer in the Blue Cloud Pavilion, like Meng Tong, who was simple-minded, when Murongzhen said that, he would probably be impatient to get his hands on her and rush to be her subject. Unfortunately, Murongzhen was not facing anyone else but Lin Yi. Murongzhen stroked his hair, coquettishly, as if there was no one else around. She purposely put on all sorts of seductive poses that would make any man's nose bleed. Lin Yi couldn't help but sigh. This woman really wouldn't stop until she got what she wanted. "Miss Murong, it's getting late. In addition, men and women should not touch each other. Your request is indeed somewhat inconvenient. Forgive me for being powerless. Please leave." Lin Yi shook his head indifferently. "You." Murongzhen could not help but feel angry. Her already towering chest heaved up and down. Pointing at Lin Yi, he was speechless for a long time. Over the years, Murongzhen had captured more than 10 women. She had always been extremely confident in her beauty. Moreover, she understood men very well. As long as she gave them a little sweetness, they would definitely take the bait. This trick of seduction, whether it was in her hometown or in the 3 great pavilions, had never failed her. Murongzhen had always been a tried and tested woman. If she had not offended Shang Guanlan, she would have been like a fish in water by now and become a famous lady in the 3 pavilions who was the center of attention. Even if she was sent to the welcoming pavilion, judging from the reactions of the newcomers in the Blue Cloud Pavilion, in Murongzhen's eyes, these people were nothing more than trash that she could summon at her beck and call. However, Murongzhen never thought that her time-tested seduction trick would work. in front of Lin Yi from the secular world, it had no effect at all. He did not even take the initiative to throw himself at her. How could a great beauty like her endure that? No matter how slutty she was, Morongjun was still a woman in the end. When she failed to attract a man by offering her body to seduce him, it was definitely a fatal blow to her. The consequences were also extremely terrifying. Morongjun pointed at Lin Yi for a long time in exasperation. Then she said angrily, "Are you a man or not? Don't you know what it means to have tender feelings for the fairer sex? Aren't you just a commoner from the secular world? What's there to be arrogant about? I'm giving you a chance because I'm flattering you. Otherwise, I wouldn't even bother to look at trash like you who doesn't have the strength or background. If that's the case, then it's my honor." Linny smiled faintly, not denying it. "Isn't that so? An idiot like you who doesn't know how to flirt, I'm sure that you'll never be able to hook up with any woman in this lifetime. You can just wait to be a bachelor for the rest of your life." Morongjun paused for a moment, then added, "Even if there are, they'll at most be those commoners who have never seen the world. They're trash who can't even compare to a single toe of mine. Then I'm really sorry. My girlfriends might not be the most beautiful, but they're more than enough compared to you, Lady Morong." Lin Yi's expression turned serious as he sneered. Initially, he wanted to pretend to be polite to Morongjun. Even if he did not want to get too close to her, there was no need to make things so bad that they were like fire and water. No matter what, Morongjun was quite strong and had a powerful background. It was best not to provoke him. However, now that Morongjun had called his girlfriends trash, Lin Yi did not plan to pretend that he did not hear it. After all, women had always been Lin Yi's reverse scale. Well, water does not interfere with river water. This was Lin Yi's original plan. Now that Morongjun had touched his reverse scale, there was nothing more to say. So what if you're an expert at the peak of the early stage of the foundation building realm? So what if you have the support of an elder from the Soaring Sky Pavilion? If you dare to touch my reverse scale, I'll beat you to death. More than enough compared to me? Morongjun acted as if she had just heard an earth-shattering joke. She suddenly burst into laughter and beat her chest and stamped her feet. She could not stand up straight for a long time. As for Lin Yi, he stood at the door and watched coldly. He wanted to see what this woman was planning to do next. After laughing unscrupulously for a long time, Morongjun finally stood up straight. She pointed at Lin Yi and laughed as she shook her head. "Brother Lin, I thought you were an unromantic, stupid man. It looks like I've misunderstood you. If you were really that stupid, how could you make me so happy with just one sentence? Come to think of it, I haven't heard such a funny joke in a long time." As she spoke, Morongjun used her slender, jade-like finger to poke Lin Yi's chest intimately. Her intention to tease him was obvious. However, Lin Yi pushed her away with one hand without the slightest bit of tenderness for the fairer sex. With a playful look on his face, he said, "Joke? I'm sorry, I only joke with my friends. Unfortunately, Miss Morong isn't one of them, so you shouldn't think too much about it." Chapter 3860. Humph. I've put down my pride and tried to be nice to you. Since you don't know what's good for you, don't blame me for being rude. I forgot to tell you that in my heart, if you can't be my friend, then you're my enemy. I won't let any of my enemies live so leisurely. Morongjun sneered. This time, she was really angry out of humiliation. The aura of an expert at the peak of the early stage of the foundation building realm poured out of her body without reservation and pressed down on Lin Yi's head. No matter how weak she pretended to be, she was still an expert at the peak of the early stage of the foundation building realm. To her, dealing with Lin Yi who was merely an expert at the early stage of the foundation building realm, was a piece of cake. Women were not to be trifled with. A woman like her, who was not broad-minded but was not weak, was even more so. I'll ask you one last time. Are you going to be my friend or my enemy? Think carefully before you answer this question. Otherwise, you'll regret it. I promise. Morongjeon said coldly. Seduction didn't work, so you're trying to threaten me? This is only her first day in the Welcome Pavilion, but she can't wait to build her own force. This woman seems to be plotting something big. He couldn't help but laugh in his heart when he saw this. However, his face remained indifferent. Under the pressure of Morongjeon's aura, He paused for a moment. Then he replied with a normal expression, Miss Morong, well, water doesn't interfere with river water. I have no intention of being your enemy. However, if you insist on doing this, then I'll have to reluctantly do it. Hey, reluctantly do it. You're just an early stage of the foundation building realm from the secular world. Do you have the right to say such things in front of me? You're too arrogant. Morongjeon was about to attack him angrily. If he wasn't a friend, then he was an enemy. There was no third possibility. As for what He said about not interfering with each other's business, in Morongjeon's eyes, it was a load of bullshit. If she wanted to take revenge on Shangguanlan, she needed to accumulate strength and influence at all costs. There were only a few people who had the potential to be her cannon fodder. Among these people like Meng Tong were Meng Jueguang's direct subordinates, and Meng Jueguang was Su Lingchong's man. Morongjeon, had no way of contending against them in a short period of time. In other words, even if she lowered her status and took the initiative to seduce them, it would still be impossible for her to make Meng Tong and the others truly loyal to her. At most, she could make use of them behind young Master Su's back. But Yi and the others were different. They were real grassroots. Morongjeon did not have any powerful background or backing. As long as she played some tricks, it was very possible for her to make these people worship her. If he wanted to subdue Yi and his gang, the most crucial step was naturally to subdue Yi. To catch a thief, one must first capture the leader. As long as he could subdue Yi, his subordinates, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai, would naturally be easy to deal with. Moreover, from Morongjeon's point of view, Yi was indeed the most capable and had the most potential among all the newcomers. After subduing him, if there were any opportunities in the future, perhaps he could really become a top figure. Therefore, subduing Yi was a must for Morongjeon. Even though she was treated coldly during the day, now that it was night time, she still lowered her status and took the initiative to seduce him. She decided to lower herself to seduce Yi. If necessary, she wouldn't mind giving Yi a taste of sweetness. After all, Morongjeon had always been very confident in herself. Her plan was perfect, but unfortunately, everything had already become fleeting. Since seducing him did not work, she could only change her way of thinking. If the soft approach did not work, she would use the hard approach. She would use her strength to force Yi to yield. In the cultivation world, the strong had always been respected. She believed that Yi would fall for that too. Just as Morongjeon was about to use her strength to subdue Yi suddenly spoke. Is this really okay? If you fight without reporting it, you will be severely punished in the Welcome Pavilion. Lady Morong, aren't you afraid that someone will kick you when you're down? As he spoke, Yi's expression was calm as usual. He did not seem to be flustered at all. It seemed like he was merely giving a casual reminder. If Morongjeon insisted on not listening to him, he would not mind playing along with her until the end. Hearing that, Morongjeon's aura froze. She could not help but shiver when she regained her senses. Just as Yi had said, Her current situation was not good. Originally, she could have become a member of the inner circle of the Soaring Sky Pavilion's second generation, but now she was suddenly knocked down to the ground, becoming a lowly Clear Cloud Pavilion newcomer without any status. If she committed any crime at this time, she believed that those who banished her to the Clear Cloud Pavilion in order to curry favor with Shangguan Lan, and Su Lingchong would not mind stepping on her again, adding insult to injury. If that happened, Morongjun might be blacklisted by Welcome Pavilion. When that time comes, she might not even be able to enter Blue Cloud Pavilion. She would be completely cut off from the three great pavilions. That would be a real tragedy. She would never have the chance to turn the tables in her life. Thinking of this, Morongjun quickly withdrew her aura and glared at Lin Yi. It was all because of this arrogant and despicable bastard that I almost made a huge mistake. Just you wait, this beauty, you'll regret it. Morongjun said with a face full of hatred. She then turned around and left. Her seduction did not work, and she could not threaten him with force. If she continued to stay here, she would only be asking for trouble. Looking at Morongjun's enchanting figure, Lin Yi took a deep breath. This is ridiculous. She failed to seduce me, and now she's threatening me? If it weren't for Lin Yi killing her now, it would be too troublesome. Otherwise, she would be dead by now. Lin Yi didn't want to expose his strength before the Southern Sky Gates matter was settled, but the girl was already in his blacklist. Although there might be trouble in the future, there was nothing he could do now that things had come to this. This woman was not a good person anyway. So be it. Lin Yi had enemies all over the place. One more wouldn't make a difference. What Lin Yi did not know was that even if he did not offend Morongjun today, he would still end up on the opposite side of Morongjun and Shangguan Laner in the future. What he did now was to clarify the relationship between him and her. However, it did not matter. He would deal with the situation as it came. Lin Yi shook his head and smiled. He then entered the space inside the jade pendant and continued to cultivate as if nothing had happened. Taking advantage of the fact that the heart-devouring exquisite herbs seedling had yet to mature, Lin Yi needed to stabilize his cultivation base at the peak of the early stage of the foundation building realm. He also needed to strengthen his foundation as much as possible in preparation for his breakthrough. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.